Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the St. Louis Preservation Board. To establish who is here, I'm going to call a roll. Commissioner Fathman, are you present?
I'm present.
Great. Commissioner Robinson, are you present?
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton, are you present? Commissioner Killeen, are you present?
Present.
Commissioner Richardson, are you here?
Present.
Alderman Coder, are you here?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I am present. Can anybody see Commissioner Hamilton?
Yes.
Okay, she is here.
Commissioner Weber is
Weber, are
also here, Chairman.
David Weber?
Here, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Okay, did I overlook anybody who's here and I did not call their name?
Mr. Hamilton, you're muted.
I heard Commissioner Hamilton. She popped on while you were muted. Commissioners, looking at the agenda, are there any changes that we need to make? Does anybody need to recuse themselves from the discussion or voting on any of these items? Speak now. Okay. Hearing no changes proposed to the agenda and no commissioners recusing themselves from discussion on any of these items, we'll proceed with this agenda, beginning with agenda item A, 1026 to 1028 Geyer.
This is 1026 to 1028 Geyer Avenue. It is a preliminary review to construct exterior patio covering. It is located in the Soulard Local Historic District. And here is its location. It is on a corner on Geyer Avenue and Menard Street, and the elevation that will be visible will be on Menard Street. And again, here is the front of the building. And here is the building directly across the street. For context, it's the Grizzly Bear. And then here is the location of the proposed covered patio. It would be this outdoor space here. And this is the existing conditions. And here is the site plan. As you can see, there would be covered patio seating and then uncovered patio seating. They're also proposing a ramp, and they would be doing some interior work to the garage, but no exterior work. And here, the building, as you can see, would be your right. Oh, I would also like to point out that there is no rear wall. That will be the existing 6-foot fence. And then also you can see the location of the overhead doors, which would be the glazing that would separate the covered section from the street. And again, here is a rendering of the site plan. You can see that covered and uncovered patio seating. And then here it is in plan view. This proposal is to construct a rear exterior patio covering. Under the Soulard standards, such a structure requires a model example. In this instance, a historic building dating from before 1929. There are no historic model examples for such structures. Lacking a model example, the Cultural Resources Office has recommended a structure that is structurally light and as visually unobtrusive as possible to allow the historic building to which it is attached to be dominant. Due to current and future conditions that restaurants and bars will face in the aftermath of COVID-19, the request for covered outdoor seating will be something the Cultural Resources Office will continue to see. The project at 1026 to 1028 Geyer Avenue is significant in that it will set a precedent for how the office and the Preservation Board should handle future applications for covered outdoor seating. And then I'm going to go through some of the renderings. As you can see from this plan, it is very simple in design. There's very little ornament. It's just supposed to be simple and light to draw no attention to itself and blend into the background as much as possible. Again, here's a rendering with the doors closed. And these garage doors that are proposed are something that we are still working with the applicant on. We have heard from the neighborhood that they are in support of the project, but not in support of these doors. So these doors are something that we're still going to work with the applicant on to make sure we come to an agreement on something that we can approve. And then here are some more renderings. And some more. As you can see, the design is pretty light. There's not a lot of ornamentation to draw more attention away from it. And when the doors are open, you'll be able to see all the way through. And the idea is that when the doors are closed, with as much glazing as possible, you'll still be able to see through the structure, so it's not so heavy. And I would like to just read a section of the standards. Section 209, new additions to existing buildings. No new additions shall be made to the public or semi-public facades, except that additions may be made to semi-public facades occurring at the rear of buildings that predate 1929. New additions constructed at private facades or at semi-public facades at the rear of structures predating 1929 are subject to new construction standards for like facades. The project partially complies. The proposed patio covering is located at the rear of a semi-public facade. Then that brings us to section 301, public and semi-public facades of new construction. The standards say that the public and semi-public facades of new construction shall be reviewed based on a model example. And then it goes on to give the areas and criteria where it must meet the model example. The project does not comply. There are no historic model examples for patio coverings. Instead, the Secretary of the Interior standards were applied. These standards recommend that an addition to a historic structure should not present a false appearance of a historic building and should be clearly subsidiary to the historic resource. The proposed plan includes an outdoor kitchen and covered and uncovered seating on the patio. The structure is simple in design, dark in color, and the glazed overhead doors, when closed, will disappear into the ceiling. The proposal complies with the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation. The Cultural Resources Office consideration of the Soulard Neighborhood Local Historic District standards and the specific criteria for addition led to these preliminary findings. The project is located in the Soulard neighborhood. Additions are subject to the standards for like facades of new construction, which requires a model example. There are no historic model examples for patio coverings, and exterior covered seating will continue to be a request that the Cultural Resources Office will see in the future. Based on these preliminary findings, the Cultural Resources Office recommends that the Preservation Board grant preliminary approval to the project with the stipulation that final design details be approved by the Cultural Resources Office. We did also receive 2 letters from the neighborhood that I would like to read into the record. Jan and Bethany et al. To be clear, I am writing on my own and not on behalf of the Soulard Restoration Group. I strongly disagree with the staff position on this project in one respect. The purposely modern garage doors design. I understand the philosophy behind it. The preservation community's intellectuals want to clearly delineate between old and new, etc. But here are 2 observations. Number 1, 18 months ago, Crow protested almost exactly similar modern garage doors at Llewellyn's. The distinction that those were / still are on an existing building and this proposal is a new building will not matter once the new is erected. Both are jarring and ugly to our historic fabric, and we residents and the general public will be subjected to both equally, whether appended on old or new, on 9th Street or on Menard. The intellectual arguments we parse and pat ourselves on the back for are irrelevant compared to the visual experience. And as a precedent, we look forward to more. Number 2, we allow modern garages, carports, and such to be built in Soulard. There are 0 model examples for a 2-car garage. But we will require that those kinds of things do not stick out architecturally or visually, that they fit in and disappear by using materials and design that do not draw drawing attention to themselves. We never would allow shiny futuristic metal garage doors on those modern constructions, and they mostly face alleys. I have lived in, have renovated in, and have loved and defended my Soulard neighborhood for 38 years now. I realize that this 11th hour protest will probably make little difference, but I would politely ask that you note my dissent at the meeting and enter this into the record anyway. And please perhaps reconsider the garage door design at 1026 to 28 Geyer so that it visually disappears. I'm not any good at Zoom meetings, so I will not attend. Thanks for your consideration, Jay Gibbs. And then we also had a follow-up. Well said, Jay. While I accept the overall design of the project, I totally agree with your objections to the garage doors. This is the major remaining flaw in this proposal. For what it's worth, Jan, I hope that you will be able to add my support to Jay's objection. Thanks, Lillian Thompson. And that's what we had.
Okay, other questions for Bethany from staff? Okay, is the applicant present, Bethany?
Yes.
Okay, let's hear from the applicant, please.
Hi, everyone. It's Ray and Mayo. We are the guys doing this project at Calypso. We
Hello.
primarily want to be a good neighbor, be a good contributor to the neighborhood, and bring something that will allow another level of service and experience to Soulard. We'd like to make this a destination rather than just being another neighborhood spot. We want it to be part of the neighborhood, but we'd love people from all over the city to be able to come and enjoy what Soulard has to offer. So you did a great job, Bethany, on explaining the project. We don't have a lot more to add other than we are willing to do whatever it takes to get everyone on the same page about the doors. And it sounds like we may already have a couple of examples to consider.
Okay, commissioners, do you have any questions for the applicant?
Chairman, it's Alderman Coder.
Proceed.
I don't have any questions. I just wanted to express my support for the project and just, per Bethany's comments, ask that, Mayo and his team continue to just work with cultural resources on maybe a different design to the garage doors, something that is a little less modern, but I think this is going to be a great addition to the neighborhood. Thanks.
Cool. Bethany, do we have any comments besides the ones that you read? Has anybody signed up to comment?
We do not know.
Okay. Okay, I think this concludes the testimony in this matter. Commissioner Hamilton, have you got a motion? I can see you unmuted, but I can't hear you. Nope, cannot hear you. Okay. Commissioner Killeen, have you got a motion? Because I can't hear Commissioner Hamilton. Bethany, I can't hear anybody.
I can't hear them either, but I can hear you.
Okay. Is there a commissioner with a voice I can hear who'd like to make a motion? Commissioner Weber, how about you? I've heard you
Can you
before.
hear me, Commissioner?
Yes, sir.
I make a motion.
Is
Follow the recommendation of the staff.
so your motion is to grant preliminary approval with the stipulation that the final design details be approved by the Cultural Resources Office. Is that correct?
Yes, can I add the word garage doors?
Yes.
Thank you.
Is there a second? To
Second.
Okay. I heard many seconds. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of granting preliminary approval with stipulations to this project signify by saying aye.
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 Are there any nays? The chair abstains from voting, but the ayes have it, and this project is approved. Okay, let's move to agenda item B, commissioners. This is 1014 to 1030 Spruce Street.
And can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Okay, I'm Jan Cameron from the Cultural Resources Office. This is a preliminary review to construct a 6-story apartment building with interior parking on the site of, the sad site, I guess, of Couples Warehouse number 7 that many of you will remember we lost in 2011. The site is located in the Couples Station Landmark District. There are no specific standards that have been adopted for this district, as is the case for many of our older landmarks. What we do in this instance is to use the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties to guide our review of the proposed redevelopment. Next. Oh, this is the site, I'm sorry. And the dotted line shows the site of Couples, of the proposed Couples development. And you can see that there are a few Couples buildings left. They are all significant for many reasons, but are unified by the use of exterior materials and form and scale. And that is what we look at when we review a new building proposed for within the district boundaries. Next. This is the only site plan I have to show you. I'm not going to do a detailed presentation because the developer and architect are here to do that. But you can see that it maintains the general scale and setbacks of the other buildings. Next. And this is the proposal. There will be a commercial first floor and residential apartments above. It will be red brick and it will have a foundation of concrete, which is typical for many of the other buildings in the district. Next. This is the western side, which will show the entry to the garages. And the only comment that I have on this one is that it seemed that the expanse of the concrete was not typical of many of the other buildings in the district, and that we'd like to see some alternative be considered there, either reducing concrete or perhaps tinting it or dyeing it to make it more like the terracotta, which is an often used material for decorative elements on the other buildings. Next. This facade is the east elevation and it will face an adjacent Couples structure. So most of it will not be visible, and they have returned the brick, as we've asked, sufficiently to appear to be a brick building. Next. And this elevation faces the parking garage, which is not within the district and is not really considered an asset to it. And it also faces the overpass on Highway 40. Next. There's some concept shots. On the slide on the left, we are looking west towards the site. And this is one of the Couples building that is directly adjacent to the proposed development. Next. And this is the, where am I here? I got lost. This is the opposite context. Again, we see the few scattered remnants of the Couples structures and a parking lot. Next. And this is directly west of the property, the off-ramp from the highway, and some other industrial structures. On the right is actually cat-a-corner from the property and is the municipal garage. Next. And there you see the parking garage, the concrete garage. We're looking directly south. with the site on the left and the site on the right, in the right-hand slide, looking towards the couples and the courthouse building. Next. What? That's it. So the staff is recommending that the board grant preliminary approval to the design with the stipulation, as usual, that review of final documents, design details, and exterior materials is made by the Cultural Resources Office, and also that the concrete on the western elevation be reconsidered. Questions?
Okay, commissioners, are there questions of staff? Okay, hearing none. Is the applicant present?
Yes.
Yes.
Then tell us what you're going to do.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Nick Van Siever, developer with the Opus Group here locally in St. Louis. We're really excited about this residential development at 1014 Spruce Street. Our development will have approximately 151 residential units, ranging from studios to 2-bedroom units. We'll have approximately 50 parking stalls within the first floor, and then we'll be leasing the balance of the parking stalls from the couple's garage adjacent to our property. The building will be 6 stories. We'll have a residential lobby and approximately 3,000 square feet of retail space going along Spruce. Our development will bring additional residential options for our renters looking to live in downtown St. Louis. We're excited to present a development that will improve the pedestrian experience going along Spruce Street and will increase foot traffic, and also be removing a vacant lot from downtown St. Louis. The target residents will be primarily, single young professionals seeking a community atmosphere in an active urban environment. I'd like to now introduce Gary, who is an architect for the Opus Group. He'll be better able to describe our exterior architectural design.
Good afternoon. Like Nick said, we're really happy to be doing this project and presenting it to you. Really agree with what comments you made in the write-up, the report. Our intent from the beginning was to have a red brick building to really complement and sort of emulate the kind of boxy warehouse look of the adjacent couples buildings. So we used kind of square proportioned windows, punched windows, a very flat facade, a little bit of precast concrete detailing at the base of the building, and a few datum lines to relate to some of the string cornice lines on the buildings around us. I appreciate your comment about the concrete on 11th Street. We probably were relating more than we should to the parking garage that was right next to us on that street. We don't have a problem agreeing to the stipulations that you've stated in your write-up about changing it to brick or a terracotta color stone, precast stone material compatible with the brick.
And Gary, sorry to cut you.
If you want to run it.
Pardon?
We do have your presentation set up if you want to go through it.
Okay.
The renderings and so forth.
Sure. So maybe the next page. Again, this shows the facade. The top elevation is at the north with the building to the left. Our intent is to have the brick match as close as we can. We will go out with samples and a variety of samples to match them up to the buildings around us as best we can. It can't be perfect, but we want to get as close as we can. So we've provided the suggested materials kind of on the right side of this page. But on the street elevations, we are providing the brick material as the dominant material. And again, at the west elevation at the bottom on 11th, we will work within your stipulation for that facade. On the next page, after this, these were the 2 facades that aren't on the street. The top one, the south elevation, is facing the garage. We have some context views we can kind of show from the freeway, but we did wrap the brick around the corner. that's exposed on 11th, which you see on the left side of the page, and kind of almost like eroded the brick away as we transition to the more neutral gray fiber cement panel reveal panels that we have there. Same thing on the east elevation. As you can see there, that is what faces kind of an alley type space against the building to the east of us. So on the right side of that, you can see where we're taking the brick, wrapping the corner, and kind of eroding it away as you get further down that alley where it's not as exposed to the street. Again, we try to work with a simple palette of materials, brick being dominant where you really see it, and then just keeping it fairly neutral in those more hidden areas of the building. On the next page, we have some context views on the following page. So these are a series of views where we place the building within a SketchUp model. So in the upper left, you see it from the freeway, the gray parking garage, and then the off-ramp, and then our building is the kind of darker red building that you see tucked in there. On the upper right, again, is more of an aerial as you come to the north on 11th Street. That's an intersection of 11th and Spruce. So again, showing how our building fits within that context, trying to respect the zero lot line placement of the adjacent buildings. Kind of going clockwise then. So down to the bottom right, our building is the one that's kind of the darker red tucked to the background. And again, it shows how we have wrapped that brick and kind of eroded it away from that northeast corner as you go down that alley type space. So trying to, again, not just stop the brick directly at the face of the building, but to turn the corner a little bit. To the lower left is that same view more from ground level on Spruce. And then ending here, kind of in the middle view on the left, shows 11th and Spruce, that northwest corner. And again, kind of the concrete base at the garage entries that we will be working with the brick or terracotta material to switch that out. I think that's the last page, unless there's one more. Yeah. So that's the design of the building, the context, and how we came about with the design. So certainly open to any questions or comments that you have.
Commissioners, are there questions for the applicants?
Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman?
Proceed.
Oh, great. It's the question I had is, it looks like the design, it's very handsome, by the way, and to the developer, boy, this is exciting. Thank you for considering developing down there. It's more of an architect question. It looks like you've related to the garage pretty well in scale and matching floor heights and all that. Would the budget allow you to actually relate better to the warehouses and maybe get a little taller on the first floor? And so if you can go back to the perspective pictures.
Yeah, it's smaller than the other buildings. The issue we run into is with there's some code requirements for the type of construction type and limits of height. I believe it's 75 feet. And we're kind of up at, I believe it's somewhere around 72 or something like that. We're working with standard apartment 9-foot clear ceiling heights. The floor structure, the wood structure that we use up above there. So it would be, I would say it would be outside of our budget to try to pull that up to match that other building. And it would be probably, given the smaller size of these units, to get a much taller than a ceiling height much above 9 feet, it would start to maybe become a little out of proportion within those apartments. They're fairly small. So those are some of the drivers for how we got to the floor height. 10'4" is a pretty typical wood frame apartment floor to floor height. Allows for a 14-inch truss and a 9-foot ceiling.
Okay. Oh, I can understand all those constraints. I guess I'd hoped to ask Jan earlier, but I couldn't get my microphone to work. Jan, are we trying, Mr. Chairman, I hope you'll give me that permission to ask her a quick question, or should I hold that until later?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Jan, when we review this and when you review this, when you say you want to make sure we match the scale of the warehouses and all that, do you feel like that they've done that with this design?
Well, there is some variance in the heights of the individual warehouses. And it is smaller, but then I think that gives it enough of a I don't know. It appeared to me in the elevation that it replicated the scale well enough to be considered compatible. The Secretary of the Interior standards want to be sure that any new construction is clearly perceivable as new construction. So I guess it didn't really bother me as much.
Okay, thank you both.
Further questions, commissioners?
Chairman, may I ask a question just for clarity?
Yes.
The architect testified that he had no problem with the cultural resources office stipulations. Earlier in staff's testimony, they cited a desire for Western Elevation to be reconsidered. In the testimony, did the architect mean to stipulate to that? I'm unclear.
Yes, we agreed to that stipulation to change that exposed concrete material that was relating to the garage. We will change that to brick and or a terracotta of a compatible color, I believe were the suggestions made. We will work within those constraints and make those changes.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Further questions from commissioners to the applicant?
Chairman, it's Alderman Coder.
Proceed.
Not a question, more of just a comment. This building's in the 7th Ward. I've worked closely with Opus, the developer on this project. I fully support it and hope we will grant preliminary approval.
Excellent. Further comments, further questions from,
Commissioner,
yes.
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to ask about parking. Is there sufficient parking for everyone? And is there any thought of that there's so much parking that they would open up anything for public parking?
Yes, we will have 50 stalls within the building, but then we have an agreement with the parking garage to lease up to 145 additional stalls for our residents. There are no, in this district, there are no retail parking requirements. So we believe the parking garage to the south sufficiently supports the neighborhood and retail for any retail parking.
So 50 within the building, how many units are in the building again?
151.
151. So 2/3 of the people have to park in the other garage, correct?
Yes, yep. There'll be at least stalls in the monthly parking garage.
Is there any, if I'm over there and I got my groceries from Schnucks, how do I get to my apartment?
We'll have systems in place where a resident can park their car for a few minutes, either in the loading dock or in the garage drive lane. We'll have all that worked out to make sure residents are sufficiently taken care of.
Thank you.
Commissioner Weber, you're from a different neighborhood, so you may not be familiar. We actually have a Schnucks 3 blocks from that building. We'll just be walking back and forth with our groceries.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
No problem. Do we have speakers, Bethany?
No, those were the only two.
Okay,
Hello?
great,
Hello?
thank you. Who's making that noise?
We can hear you, Tiffany.
Oh, thank you. Okay. I had technical support come help me, so I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Hamilton, if you can hear me now, do you have a motion since you have now revealed that you have a microphone?
Finally, yes, I have a motion.
Proceed.
My motion is that the Preservation Board grant preliminary approval to the proposal with the condition that the concrete surround of the garage entries be reconsidered and subject to review of final documents. Design details and exterior materials by the Cultural Resources Office.
Is there a second, commissioners?
I second.
Second.
Okay, a motion has been made and seconded twice. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, the chair abstains from this vote. The motion carries. Thank you very much. Okay, commissioners, we're moving on to agenda item C, which is 4490 to 4494 Lindell.
Do we have an applicant, Bethany?
I believe so. No, maybe we don't. Is the
Okay.
applicant on?
Why don't we then proceed to agenda item D?
Actually, this is John Warren. I'm on right now. Vic is on as well, so the applicant is here.
Jan Cameron, Cultural Resources Office. This is a preliminary review application to consider the demolition of the Optimist International buildings. There are, in fact, 2 of them, although they are connected, for the construction of a 7.5-story apartment building with interior parking. The project or the proposal is being considered under a couple of jurisdictions. The first being Ordinance 69423, the Central West End Historic District Ordinance, because the property is located within the boundaries of the Central West End Historic District. And the second would be, it is also in a preservation review district. So the requirements of that ordinance adhere to the review as well. This is what's known as the pavilion. It is the more significant and earlier structure on the Optimist site. It was constructed 1961 to 62. Bethany, let's take the next one. You would. These are the 2 buildings. And is that the next one? Okay. Well, we may go back to that. The Cultural Resources Office several years ago noticed the loss of significant mid-century modern structures, the San Luis apartments being the most egregious example of that. So in order to react to that, we had applied for a Historic Preservation Fund grant to complete a survey of all the mid-century modern structures in the city. And what many people don't realize is the city was fairly famous for its mid-century design in relation to the architectural schools that were promoting that here. And we really had some groundbreaking buildings, of which the Optimist Club is one of them. In any case, we received the grant and we contracted with Peter Meijer out of Portland, who specialized in mid-century modern. And he and the Cultural Resources staff have surveyed over 23,000 buildings constructed within the period for mid-century modern, which is 1945 to 1975. 1975 is kind of an arbitrary cutoff, but we had to stop somewhere. We had identified out of that 2,000 significant buildings that had some significance. And those were more intensively studied to come up with 50 that we thought were eligible for the National Register and of high importance to the architectural history of the city. We took those 50 and we held a public meeting At which case we invited designers, architects, and the general public to come in and look at what we discovered about all of these buildings and to choose what they thought were the most important structures for the city. And then we reduced it to 25 based on the votes that we received. And this building, the Optimist, was one of the 25. So the building is extremely significant. And keep that in mind as I go through my presentation. The first consideration for the demolition of the building falls under the Central West End Historic District standards. And one of the things that the standards do not do is distinguish between what's considered, quote, contributing and non-contributing, because at the time the standards were written in 1979, this building was just about 18 years old. And it fell under the arbitrary 50-year cutoff for eligibility for the National Register. And as the important point of the designation was to allow advantages that go along with listing in the National Register. That was why this building was considered non-contributing. When Central West End revised their standards in 2013, they specifically stated that they recognized that buildings had attained significance in the intervening years. And this building is one of them. This is a flyer. We did our top 25, we did flyers of this, showing the most important buildings, and they are on exhibit in our office if anybody cares to take a look at it. In any case, moving to the Central West End standards, they have criteria for demolition, which is not too dissimilar from that of the Preservation Review Ordinance. One is the architectural quality and special character. And I think that we've made the case that this building is considered high merit. Now, the adjacent building, which is a 1978 addition, is not high merit. It is merit. It contributes to the context of the Optimist site and of the Central West End, but it is not of the significance of the corner building, the pavilion. The condition of both buildings is number 2 on the list, and they are both in good condition, certainly what we are generally unused to seeing in proposed demolitions, and with no major structural issues. Number 3 is the site is at the corner of Lindell and Taylor, and its presence in the district and its visibility is highly critical. Number 4 discusses the immediate setting, and this is on a street where there are many other examples of high style, very significant mid-century modern structures, such as the AAA building, the Chancery, and well, there was the St. Sam Regis apartments. I'm sorry. That's a different problem. So in any case, it is only one of a number of highly significant mid-century modern structures along this part of Lindell. But the Lindell itself is a mix of architecturally significant late 19th and early 20th century residential buildings, most of which have been converted to other uses. So it is a varied architectural environment. Okay, and then finally, that we need to discuss the impact of the removal on the urban fabric, and the loss of this site would have a significant alteration to the current feeling of this really unusual mid-century modern environment. And secondly, the demolition needs to be reviewed under the Preservation Review Ordinance, which we're all very familiar with, and their criteria. Again, the redevelopment plan relates to a redevelopment plan passed by ordinance, which is not relevant in this case. The second criteria is architectural quality, which we've already discussed. Second is condition, which we've already discussed. And it says 2 things that are of concern. And one is that buildings of high merit shall not be approved unless there are unusual circumstances. And buildings of sound condition shall also not be approved unless there are some evidence of structural failure or other deterioration. The site is in one of the most affluent and successful areas of the city, so neighborhood effect and reuse potential is reasonable and good. But no information has been submitted to counter the viability of the building for reuse. No economic hardship evidence has been submitted to our office. And finally, urban design. Again, the building contributes to the mid-century character of this site, and its loss would make a substantial impact upon that. Subsequent construction we'll address in a moment. Other than that, there's no commonly controlled property and no accessory structures that are relevant. So to proceed to reviewing the proposed construction for both of the Central West End standards and the subsequent construction aspects under the Preservation Review District, the building generally complies as far as we were able to determine, having received only renderings and not elevations or an accurate site plan, with the exception of the use of metal panels, which is not allowed under the standards and is limited strictly under the form-based code, which this does fall into. I'm not addressing the form-based code because it is not something that is under the purview of the Preservation Board, but rather zoning. Although our office does assist zoning in the review of it. So that having been said, the staff is recommending denial of the preliminary review proposal for the demolition of the building with the following findings: 4490 Lindell and 94 Lindell, which is the adjacent addition, are located in the Central West End Historic District. Both buildings were erected by the Optimist International Organization. The corner pavilion by Van Hoffen of Schwartz and Van Hoffen was completed in '62. The other building in '78. The pavilion was identified as of high architectural significance in the Survey of Mid-Century Modern Architecture, and based on that is considered to be eligible for the National Register as a single site. The '78 building, slightly less than 50 years, is part of the Optimist site and would be eligible as part of the complex or as a thematic nomination. However, it does not have the architectural significance of the corner building. The Central West End Historic District standards acknowledge buildings such as the Optimist will attain significance as the years pass and may therefore be considered contributing structures to the historic district. And the applicant has not submitted any evidence to the condition of the building, and the applicant has declined to consider a compromise to allow retaining the Optimist Pavilion in their proposed project. I think we can just do some context photos. Bethany, if you will go to the next slide. This is the adjacent building, the addition to the Optimist. It's a little difficult to photograph. It is a parking garage in essence with some office space above it. And while it was designed to reflect some of the vocabulary of the corner building, it is not, as you can see, as in any way as significant. Next. This is the western elevation with the famous ribs or fins, which is the character defining feature of the pavilion building. Next. Example of some of the details on the building. It is vineyard and stone. Next. And another shot from Lindell looking towards the Archbishop's residence. Next. This is the proposed building, an aerial view of it. And it does appear to comply with setbacks. But again, as I said, we've only had renderings, so we can't be absolutely certain for that. There will be an entrance to the underground parking, or the first level parking, I should say, from Lindell. There is currently an entrance to first level parking for the Optimist Club. So that, although that is not really in compliance with the standards, since it's existing, you know, another one was not, it should be not an issue. Next. This is the Lindell elevation. Now the applicant does have a presentation, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but you will note the number of metal panels that are indicated, both blue and black, and also 3 different colors of brick. Next. On the left is the Taylor elevation, and there is brick on the interior U-shaped element there. So that is a nice detailing. The south elevation at the alley again has the metal panels.
Hello, everyone.
Excuse me. Next. And this is the Lindell elevation of both buildings. Note the very tall mid-century modern apartment complex, the Jackson Arms. It's directly adjacent on the east. Next. Another shot of it. You have a better shot of the Jackson Arms here. And also of the Archbishop's residence, Cross Taylor on the west. Next. Another shot of the pavilion looking south. Next. This is the Harris Armstrong building, also mid-century modern, and it's directly adjacent on the south. Next. Now this is the rear elevation with the most amazing concrete ramp to access parking. Again, it's not an articulated elevation, but it is directly adjacent to an alley. Next. And this is the opposite streetscape, currently vacant. Next. And this is the another mid-century modern building, the Chancery and the Cathedral at the other end of the block. Next. This is the context to the west of the site with, again, historic 1920s high-rise apartment building, as well as a mid-century modern structure. Next. Another evidence of the interesting composition of Lindell with the Queen Anne turn of the century house right next to the Jackson Arms. Next. Again, the smaller scale residential buildings. Next. And we're back to there. So that concludes my presentation. I do have some additional exhibits to enter. We received about 50 letters, both for and against the proposal. They have been provided to the board members, at least all but the few that we received just prior to the commencement of the meeting. They have a summary. Those that were for the demolition of the Optimist Club, numbered 34. That's not including the ones that I'll speak of in a moment. 17 of them were from residents from the Central West End. 26 were from city residents altogether. They included 8 developers, 3 architects, a real estate broker, neighborhood residents. Several were associated with the developer and a Clayton alderman. The statements generally said things like the reuse of the Optimist building is difficult, that they thought density would be better, the land was underutilized, that the design of the building does not fit in with historic Central West End century-old buildings. 60 plus years is not historic. Residential would be a better use for the site. The project would bring in tax dollars. And the project would continue the trend of new life in the Central West End. We received 17 letters against the demolition. 7 were from Central West End residents, 11 from city residents in general. They included 4 architects, and they included some prominent preservation agencies, such as the Missouri Alliance for Preservation, the Central West End Association, Society for Architectural Historians, and the Landmarks Association of St. Louis, and also Modern STL, which is a group that champions the mid-century modern buildings within the city. And we also had a letter from Kristen Miner, who was the person that worked with us to do the historic mid-century modern survey. If you bear with me, I do need to read a couple of letters in to the record that we received just prior to the meeting. One is from David Stokes. He says, my name is David Stokes. For identification purposes, I'm the Director of Municipal Policy at the Show Me Institute. I'm writing in regards to the proposal to allow demolition of 4490 to 94 Lindell Boulevard in order to construct a new 150 unit apartment building at the site. The ideas presented here are my own. I support granting permission to the developers to demolish the building and construct the new building. And then we have a letter from Cammie Lewis Holiday, a 17th Ward resident. I'm writing to add my voice to the cacophony of those opposed to the demolition of the Optimist International Building, the mid-century modern gem in the Central West End. I've only lived in St. Louis a short time, but my home here was in the same neighborhood, just a few blocks away from the Optimist International Building. As an architect and aesthete, I immediately saw its worth and potential. I took a moment to appreciate it every time I passed by and often lingered on long walks to admire it. So she is strongly against the demolition of the structure. And finally, I have 2 more in opposition to the demolition. One from Jesse J. Parker. I live and invest in property in the city, and I prefer demolition be denied. It's for the Optimist Club. It's significant to a period of modern architecture that is rare in the city and worth keeping. And from Alexander Rogers, I support denial of the preliminary request for demolition of the Optimist Club, hoping we can keep some of the great history from a bygone era along Lindell. That should do it. Are there any questions?
From commissioners, questions for Jan?
Jan, it's Alderman Coder. Do we have anything from the Alderwoman for the area?
We don't have any specifically from her. She has been working closely with the neighborhood to get as much public input as possible. And so the massive amount of generation of these letters, I think she should be thanked for, because she is really wanting to make sure that everyone has the right to speak on this project.
Okay, but to be clear, she didn't write a letter stating
I don't have a letter
position
from
one
her.
way or another. Okay, thank you.
Well, Alderman Coder, May I speak, Chairman Callow?
Oh, she's
Yes,
there.
yes, please, Alderwoman.
Um,
good, she's on.
Yes, I'm on. I didn't write a letter. So, yeah, thank you for allowing me to be at this preservation hearing. And just a couple notes regarding this, the hearing and the demolition of the Optimist Club. You know, as it has been mentioned, you know, St. Louis was famous for mid-century buildings, and we have demolished a lot of history. And it's really important to have history so that we can learn from it. And if we demolish it, we forget history. And I received a bunch of, a lot of emails opposing the demolition of the Optimist Club. I received a few that wanted it demolished. I also read a lot of the letters that came in to Jan that were pro and con regarding the Optimist Club demolition. And I think that there can be a happy medium. I don't think it needs to be an either or. This Optimist Club is a historic building, as Jan had mentioned, with many examples. And we don't have to do an either or. There's an opportunity to design an apartment complex with 150 units with this building standing. And it would look great in terms of incorporating the Optimist Club into an apartment building that you would like to have. It would be unique and it would be attractive. What architects are for. Architects are designers. They create art. And we've done a lot of things in terms of what we do as a society. We can build this in building. So I just wanted to make a recommendation in this hearing and to the developers is to look at incorporating this Optimist Club into the design. And then we would have a win-win for the city. And I think that would be the best possibility for us. I also want to make a note, and I've heard regarding, you know, and I think it's a win-win because or it is a win-win incorporating the Optimist Club into the design of the building because, you know, the opponents, the people who want to demolish the building because they want high density and walkability, we still could have high density and walkability, and we still could have the Optimist Club when we put these two together. And so it's not that we can't have high density and walkability, and we can't have a building that's 150 or 200 units. It's about reusing the site, reusing the building, and incorporating them both. And just a couple other notes, or another note, is that somebody, I've heard that, you know, that this building is not sellable. And I received an email, and Jan and Don also received an email from Tracy Jeffries. And the Ivy Alliance Foundation, a nonprofit organization, has expressed interest in purchasing the Optimist International Foundation. And I'm just going to read a little bit from the email that we received. The chair, Tracy Jeffries, is the building properties manager for the Ivy Alliance Foundation, and she states, "We are aware of the history that surrounds our community and the historic presence of the Optimist International Foundation. Our goal, if provided the opportunity to buy the building, is to preserve the building of its natural presence, provide space for other nonprofit organizations, develop and establish community relations by supporting mankind through our services, as the Optimist International has done for nearly 60 years. The next process that we have is that we have actually requested a scheduled appointment with the owner of the Optimist Club, and he stated that we could do an internal walkthrough of the facility when he gets back from being out of town. So I just wanted to note that in terms of that there are other interested parties in this Optimist Club that want to keep it, the Optimist building up and not demolished. And at the same time, I'll just go back to, we don't need to have an either or. We can have a collaboration and bring both a modern design and a historic design together. And this would be fabulous for St. Louis. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman. That does raise a question for me. Jen, who owns the Optimist International Building?
The Optimist International.
And the applicant before us today, what is their relationship to the building?
They have stated that they have an option on the property. I don't have any evidence to that effect, but that's what they said.
Okay, we'll ask them when they come up. Any further questions for Jan? Okay, thank you very much. The applicants, are you here?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can.
Great.
Proceed.
Okay, Jan, you're going to advance the slides?
Well, Bethany will.
Go for it. Well, thank you all. Hope you can hear me, and pleasure speaking to you today. I'd like to go over a few of the slides, and Jan has done a great job talking about the building, so I'm not going to get into a lot of details that she's already covered, but I hope to cover a lot more of the other ones to provide full context. We are seeking to demo the existing building. The existing building has been listed publicly on the market for over 6 years, approaching 8 years now, and has been under contract by many, many individuals, many developers seeking to demo it and build anew, and many other developers seeking to rehab the building and renovate it with historic standards in mind for a variety of other purposes, including office or maybe residential. So a lot of what I'll talk about is the consideration of that when we came to this conclusion after 6 years of watching the site about a block away from my office sit there and languish as a proposal to start getting investment back into the community. You can go to the next slide. This is the existing picture from Lindell Terrace. So if you sit above that building or in front of that building, that's what you're seeing today. What's very unique about this project is that, you know, we had a lot of difficulty getting opinions through the normal course of affairs in the city. And I will go over that and detail that. I think that's important for the commissioners, board members to hear about that. I think it's a good way to think about new development in the city, especially in the Central West End. And there are many perspectives about this building, but one common thread is that the building sits almost vacant. The building is in many cases, you know, limitedly used, and often is considered vacant by those around it, and has very little contribution in terms of the actual life and activity in the area. And the building continues to deteriorate. We'll give you certain examples of that, and the owner who will speak is the best to talk about that, and they will share with you what happens in maintaining one of these 60-year-old buildings where the systems are over 60 years old. There's significant deterioration. There are structural issues with the garage, and there's flooding all over the basement. We'll talk through that. Go to the next slide, please. I don't see the slides anymore. Hopefully you guys do.
No, we don't.
Okay, let's fix our technology. Hold on just 1 second.
Okay, apparently her computer crashed.
Okay, did it crash like forever? Did it crash like we'll take a 5-minute recess?
Why don't we take a recess and let
Okay.
us see what's going on?
This meeting is recessed for 5 minutes while we work on technology. Thank you all for your patience. Okay, this meeting of the Preservation Board is back in session. Mr. Alston, please proceed.
All right, thank you. So this is the site plan. I'd like to make a couple comments about the site plan. The site is a 36,000 square foot site. 0.83 acres, very tight. That's what makes the site so challenging. There's also a setback on the front. There's a 30-foot setbacks on the side. And we are preserving all setbacks. So there's no real variances that we're requesting on any of the setbacks. No new curb cuts. When you take the site, the original site, 0.83 acres, and you remove the setbacks, you're down to 0.69 acres. And then for your own benefit, please keep in mind that Jan did reference two buildings, the pavilion building on the west and then the newer structure on the east. If you were to salvage the pavilion structure, then you would be down to 0.30 acres of buildable land that is available to you, 0.30 acres. That is smaller than the footage that you have for most of the other high-rise buildings that you're looking at in the Central West End. Never mind the footings that you would have to demolish of the existing structure in order to build that high-rise. So the site is very tight. It's probably one of the smallest and tightest sites that's been redeveloped or constructed in the Central West End in the last 20 to 30 years. And we're building 150 units, 150 parking spaces. We're going 1.5 decks underground, and then we're rising 7 stories with a mezzanine up in the air. So it's going to be a very tall structure, but at the same time complies fully with form-based code and complies with all of the zoning and other variances. There's no new curb cuts or variances needed. I'm going to go to the next slide. This is a typical elevation. We can cover the rest, but this is a typical elevation. They all look very similar to this. Joe Klitzing, who's my architect, is also here. He can address any questions that you might have on the specifics. The building is 90% brick. It's a tremendous amount of glazing. Over 15% of it is glazed. We also have balconies of some sort on every unit. We have a mezzanine that offers terraces and views and a great amount of terrace space. This is a very unique type of unit. You won't find this type of unit anywhere else in the Central West End. And it offers some amenities and features that you won't find anywhere else as well. The amount of secondary material on here is less than 10%. Actually, it's black metal panels and blue metal panels. I did hear that there was some issue with the metal panels. We don't believe so. And we do think that it complies because it's less than the 90%, less than 10% that we mentioned. And it's a curtain wall metal system that we're using. It could easily be replaced with stucco if that is an issue, but we don't think that building materials are an issue when you look at this building. If we go to the next slide, I have some comments that I'd like to share that I think are important. A lot of what the Alderwoman, Jan, and others have said, I think are very valid points to keep in mind. But I think it should also be kept in mind that this building has currently been on the market for 8 years. To talk about offers that are potential offers or potentially offers that would come in the future are great, but really the reality of what has happened is that the Optimist has bought this building and built it over the years, and for over 50 years been in the building, paid no tax because they're a nonprofit, and on an ongoing basis, the building continues to get more deferred maintenance, obsolete systems, and a variety of other maintenance that has to be done. So if you can imagine, in 2013, this new Central West End survey was done that Jan mentioned, but before that, you're not going to find this building on the record. It's not really of significance. It's not of significance as many of the other historical buildings in the Central West End. But then it was put on this record, and then since then, they have not been able to sell the building. They haven't been able to sell it to anyone who's tried to build a new high-rise. They haven't been able to sell it to anyone who wants to renovate it and put in a new office customer. And so in this market, we're faced with the reality. There's nobody else providing offers on this building. If they were, they would have provided it over the last 7, 8 years. And you can talk to the owner and they will tell you what offers are on the table. But there is a significant hardship You've got a children's nonprofit that's been looking to sell for over 8 years. It's a continued money pit of maintenance costs. And there's a direct impact on scholarships for kids because you could either spend it on that or you could spend it on maintaining this building. And currently they're spending it on maintaining this building. And from the time they started to sell it to now, the price of the building continues to go down. So there's a tremendous hardship. And the next point is that it is really too small a site to take the existing pavilion structure and then build around it. If you were to do that, I would say that then incentives would need to be required. Currently, we're not asking for incentives. We're saying build a building, remove the existing structure, and build a building that can economically be viable to build in this market and in the Central West End today without incentives. And it would immediately contribute to the taxes. But if you weren't to do that, and let's say you were to build something unique, and you were to save that site and build on the 0.3 acres that were left, I almost view it as a poison pill. You would not be able to build that building. And you would certainly not be able to build it without a significant amount of subsidy. Nobody's been able to do that to date. In fact, you already had somebody try to build a building at that site, demoing the entire building, a high-rise structure, and they needed abatements. And they did not build the building without those abatements. So a lot of what we're talking about is the history of this site over the last 8 years. And all we're offering is a new proposal that weighs the pros and cons of that. It's to say that, look, there are some cons in demoing a building that has some limited marginal value from a historic perspective, but it's not as significant as many other structures. And certainly the neighborhood as a whole doesn't feel that it is as significant. The second point we're trying to make is when we do that, can we add a building of significant merit in its place, a unique building within the Central West End, and can we do it in such a way that we can contribute to the coffers of Central West End immediately into the city? And that's a big page turner. I mean, this would be the first building in the Central West End to do that in the last 20 years. And if we did it, then there would be more buildings potentially that could follow. So I think you have to keep that in mind. You can't just ignore it and look at it in a vacuum. I think it's a very important turn of events in the city, and it would mark a historic new outcome for buildings and developments and tax incentives in the city as well. The fourth point I'd make is that the design is not that great for the people who occupy the building. Limited windows, limited light, not walkable, sits vacant, most of the space is unused, and the building on this prominent corner in a walkable neighborhood like the Central West End is a basic security risk. It's dark, it's vacant, and you can't walk around that building at night. My office is literally a block and a half from that building, and it's been there for many, many years. The next point I'll make is that we don't feel that it's as significant, with all due respect, compared to many of the other buildings that we are called to preserve and Jan has spoken to. We think that it has limited value and it should be considered in contrast when we're talking about this building. The next is the form-based code. The building looks really impressive. We've made sure that the building has tremendous amount of glazing, 90% bricks, 5% metal panel system, and we preserve the setbacks, no new curb cuts, and we're bringing office, retail, and residential back into a major corner. There's limited office space, but there is office space for single office dwellers on the first floor. There is retail space on the front, just as the form-based code would have envisioned. And then there's many apartment units, 150 apartment units that are fully parked within the building as well. The next point that I wanted to make, if you advance the slides, is that it is hard to get fair consideration of this building through our process. Now, it could be that many things are changing in the Central West End, but we should be aware that as you're discussing this building, and there are many groups and forces within the city that want to preserve the building. It's fair. And maybe the bias should be towards preservation at some level, but still there should be fair consideration and review of the proposal. And that's why I look forward to speaking with you today. And I'm really happy that we got the opportunity to do so. But through this process for the last few months, it's been very difficult to get that fair shake. At some times, we are told that the only goal of the CR office is to basically preserve the building, not to look at our new building and to offer criticism or to offer maybe an optionality to say, well, let's do this or change the bricks or change the setback. So it's hard to feel that the criticism that comes up today is fair if you didn't have an opportunity to address that criticism earlier in the process before you come here. So we should have and encourage an open dialogue. And that dialogue should be, well, potentially if the building were to get demoed, well, then what would the new building look like? What would the building that we would like to have in its place look like? And that discussion isn't happening before this meeting. In fact, it's discouraged and it's not even supported. So the Central West End Neighborhood Association is another example of that. It took us many attempts to meet with this group. And then once we met with them, we did not get feedback from them. And then finally, the Alderwoman and Park Central are not working together. The byproduct of that is I'm not even able to take the project to Park Central, which is who I would have taken it to before to get this neighborhood feedback. So what we're left with is all sorts of ad hoc neighborhood meetings that we've had all across the Central West End. And I'll tell you, on one hand, it's amazing to do that because as a developer, you can go out and meet with all these people and they can give you feedback about your development and they can give you feedback about what they would like to see and do they like these ideas. And what I was struck with, there's so many people who live around this building and you'll hear from them. A lot of the owners that wrote in were the condo owners and the condo presidents that basically live around this building. So we've had to go piece that data together. There's a tremendous amount of interest in supporting the redevelopment of the site. And we have been encouraged by that. And we look forward to the fact that hopefully, if nothing else, this takes us to the point where we can discuss that further and get to the point of redeveloping something that we're all proud of. And the final points that I would put there is that the neighborhood support of the building has been pretty phenomenal. Normally, when I build something, it doesn't matter where I build it, could be in Denver or Kansas City or in St. Louis. It's always easier for folks to say, well, I don't want that built. And so that's par for the course. I expect that all the time. And I didn't get as much of that here as I thought I would when I started the project. We held multiple neighborhood meetings, multiple forums. The feedback was relatively positive, in some cases overwhelmingly positive. People love the idea that no tax incentive is required. They felt that as a critical marker for the neighborhood, for the city, that we can start to develop buildings without that, and that we can change the game in terms of where that money goes and how that can improve the city on an ongoing basis. It helps the condos and the valuations in this neighborhood. It helps revitalize the commercial district, which is really struggling. You'll hear from multiple restaurateurs who wrote into Jan and said that. Said more people need to come after COVID, especially. The life in the Central West End is diminishing. The areas where you can go to basically, as simple as have a beer or have a meal with your friends has gone down. And this will help to revitalize that and make the Central West End a place we want to be. We started a petition and Jan and the group here will have access to that as well. But this was within a few days, and it can show you the overwhelming number of people who live around the building that are interested in supporting it, over 100. And then over 50 neighborhood citizens, businesses, and others emailed the CR office. And Jan did a great job of detailing those. I was very happy and pleased that she went through that in a lot of detail, and a lot of different folks supported it. So I would want to share a couple more slides, and then I will turn it over to you, the chair, to any questions. If you advance the slide, I wanted to show that we are designing memorable and unique buildings all over the city. It is not our goal to tear down any building. This is one option that we're presenting. If the neighborhood and the city feel that that option is not a viable option, then we're not going to pursue it. That's not our interest. Our interest is to build great, memorable buildings that people love to live in. And we're doing that in multiple locations all through the neighborhood. And the Central West End is the next spot that we'd like to do. And we felt that after 8 years of this building languishing, that something needed to be done, that some change needed to happen, because the status quo will not get you the change you want. You will not get that building, but it will be a high rise on 0.3 acres next to the pavilion building. The economics won't support it. The building will continue to stay the way it is, and every action has a reaction. It will continue to deteriorate. And at some point, you'll have to have some nonprofit or church buy that building. And at that point, the city will continue to not get any taxes. Go to the next slide. These are the other elevations. I think you should just advance through them. My only point in showing them is that it's the same materials, and less than 5% is a secondary material, which is the metal or the stucco. We could replace it with either or. It's not critical to us which one we go with, but we feel it complies in both cases. And then I have some elevation views. I think the next couple slides are very important to show the activated look of the building. Not too tall, certainly not too small, really fits in and looks great on the street. And I think this is what's exciting a lot of the neighborhood, that this building could be there and this building could be activated right in front of that location. And I think it makes a great, charming building at that great corner. So I'll stop there and like to answer any other questions you might have.
Thank you very much. Do you have any further parts of your presentation?
I have more slides that show the pictures, but I think we've covered most of them, so I'm happy to stop there.
Okay. Commissioners, questions for the applicant?
Chairman Richard, this is Benny Ellerby. I'm the Executive Director of Optimist International. At some point, I'd like to speak as well.
Are you signed up to speak, sir?
I am, yes.
Okay. We will come to you in just a minute.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Commissioners, questions of the applicant?
Chairman, this is Barb Burkett. May I make a comment about people trying to testify in the chat? Once again, I do not believe that if you're trying to testify in the chat, that there's any, that you're getting any of your comments on the record. There's been a Maher David, Jonathan Galder, Imran Hanafi, Catherine Howard, Andrew, maybe Andrew Wild, but I would ask if Chairman, if you might make sure that they are clear about how to testify.
I think we've got that all sorted out in the chat, but okay. If there is anyone who would like to testify in the chat, write your name and the agenda item on which you'd like to testify. And staff will process that and we'll call you at the right time. Barb Burkett, did you have anything to add, anything else to ask about comments submitted?
Yes, I would ask you, did you receive a comment that was directed regarding one of the, regarding the applicant in this case? And I just wanted to make it clear, is it true that you did not read it?
I received 2 comments, I believe, on this subject, and I read neither one. And if the person who sent me the comment was listening, I apologize for that, but that's not how we process comments.
Thank you. It was also not addressed to the board at large, is that correct? So it was not disseminated?
No, it was sent to me. I forwarded it to you.
Thank you.
Okay, I think with no comments from commissioners to the applicant, we can proceed to people who have signed up to comment. Bethany, are you running that?
I am. We have several.
Okay, I would ask that people who make comments, we don't have a formal time limit. In your mind, try to imagine how long you would like to have me talking about my office cats and limit your comment time to about that length of time. Proceed, Bethany.
Okay, first on the list is Andrew Weil.
And let's not forget the owner also. Bethany?
The owner?
Yeah.
Does the owner wish to speak?
He does.
Okay, he can go
But,
first.
but he should have signed up, but let's start with him.
Yes, he's at the bottom. He can go first.
Okay.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak. Optimist International, we have been actually citizens of St. Louis since 1923. Our first headquarters was at the old Railroad Exchange Building. We built the building in 1961-62 period and then added the second building in 1972. I know someone spoke of hardships. In the 1990s, we had 175,000 members. Today, we have less than 50,000 members. Back 1990, we had 60 some odd staff. Today, we have some 20 staff. Technology, the way it is today with communication systems, we can operate on a much smaller footprint than we once did before. You got to imagine 20 employees in a 38,000 square foot building. That means almost every employee almost has 2,000 square feet to operate in. So the building, somebody talked about the building. It is having structural issues. I know the back wall by the parking garage is having structural issues already. We have iron pipes. We have a 60-year-old building, HVAC systems. The ceiling tiles, carpeting. I can go line by line of the things that we have to try to maintain. Massive deferred maintenance issues. About 8 years ago, Covington came to us, a large developer in the St. Louis area. They backed out of the deal. Coleman went under contract after that. Coleman was going to do a total renovation of the existing building. And once Coleman basically counted their budget together, they walked away. Then a group called Well Tower, which is out of Ohio, they went under contract with us, and they were actually renovating the building for Washington University Medical. And in March of last year, Well Tower also walked away after the cost exceeded their expectations on renovations of the building. And now we find ourselves with Lux Living. This is the fourth time we've been under contract in the last 8 years. We've also been approached by at least two hotel groups wanting to hopefully keep the pavilion. And I got to say, I've been here almost 20 years. I've never heard our building called the pavilion. It's the first time ever. So that's kind of new to me. We had two hotel groups come and look at the facility, the lot. And I got to agree with Vic. Both of them walked away because they could not build a hotel on the site maintaining the western building. We have a lot of issues. The bottom floor is virtually unusual. We have it for storage. We have issues with the water. The design was horrible. I know everyone likes this architecture, but honestly, if you work in the building, you wouldn't appreciate it. It's fairly silo type situation with office space. Our employees are scattered about. Technology issues abound, electrical, plumbing, you name the issues, we have them all. And so we're kind of at wit's end. We need a smaller building. We're spending money on maintenance issues when we should be spending on scholarships and youth activities. And so I would urge the board to allow us to finish the deal with Lux Living and allow them to build a new building on this location. It's been 8 years. I do not see another buyer on the horizon. I know some lady called me from Alliance wanting to walk through the building a couple of weeks ago, but we're under contract right now, so that's not a possibility as well. So I would urge you to vote in affirmative and support Vic's proposal to build a new 7-story apartment building on the complex. Thank you, sir.
Commissioners, we're not going to be cross-questioning commenters, but with Mr. Ellerby here as the owner, do you have any questions for the owner? Okay, I hear no questions. Mr. Ellerby, I have a question or two for you.
Okay.
Number one, Did you have your oratory contest in the building this weekend?
We did. We had the oratorical contest. It was done virtually. The last few years we've been at St. Louis University, but due to COVID, we've had to leave the university, and we had it in the building.
Have you been with Optimist for very long?
I've been the executive director for 16 years, since 2005.
And a member of the Optimists before that?
Yes, sir. I'm a member with the Shreveport Club before that, and I'm a member of the St. Louis Downtown Club now.
Okay, I just had a bone to pick about judging on my entry in the late 1960s. I wondered if it's too late to do any kind of an appeal.
I think in 1960s, I could contact the folks who were back then, but I think they would deny the appeal at this point.
I enjoyed the contest very much.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And while you're breaking it, Richard, we give almost $600,000 a year in oratorical scholarships. It's a big thing for us, and we had it at the building this week, and it's a great program. And I don't know if people know about the Optimist. We have 2,300 local community clubs. The Downtown St. Louis Club that I'm a member of, we give about $150,000 a year to local community groups, Youth and Family Center, Charter Academy. So we're a very active group in downtown St. Louis.
Well, I appreciated the check, and I'm pretty sure I bought beer.
Well, congrats.
Okay, Bethany, proceed.
Next, we have Andrew Weil.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, I can't see myself, but that's probably for the best.
Is that a spider behind you?
No, I don't know what's quite behind me. I can't see myself, but as long as you can hear me, that's the important thing.
Proceed.
I will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would first like to introduce myself. I'm the director of the Landmarks Association of St. Louis. I'm testifying on behalf of the organization. I'd like for the record to state a couple of things. First off, and Mr. Chairman, you can correct me on this matter if I'm wrong, but any testimony with regard to form-based code is not applicable in this hearing. Is that correct?
That is generally correct.
Okay, thank you. Also, I'd like to state that our organization is not anti-development. We are really thrilled with the work that Lux Development has been doing all over the city, and the work that Mr. Klitzing has done for many, many decades in St. Louis, and also the work that Optimist has done and will continue to do in St. Louis. I think we're all on the same page in that we want St. Louis to be a stronger and more vital community. With that said, the testimony to hardship with regard to financial hardship that we just heard, that's a specific, as you know, Mr. Chairman, that is a specific term that has to be proved with evidence, and that has not been demonstrated to my knowledge. The structural issues that were just testified to have not been supported with any evidence to my knowledge. I'm willing to be corrected on both of those matters. In this case, we love to see investment in the city. We love to see, great buildings and new design and progress being made. However, in this case, they've chosen the wrong location. The city, with financial support from the State Historic Preservation Office, from the National Park Service, went to great lengths to identify the most significant mid-century designs in St. Louis City. This was a 2-year project. Ms. Cameron can testify to that, as she has. They worked really hard on this, and they spent public funds to identify, out of 2,300 plus buildings that fit into the broad parameters of mid-century design, they identified 25 that were the most significant, i.e. high merit, i.e. specifically singled out for protection under Ordinance 64689. The wording of the ordinance is completely unambiguous. It states that high merit buildings, meaning the buildings that have been identified as eligible for the National Register of Historic Places, which this was one of them, shall not be approved for demolition. So while I think that this is an interesting and a good project, they picked the wrong place, and there was nothing that prevented them from picking the wrong place. I mean, the information, the ordinances are online. The mid-century survey that we all as taxpayers paid for is online. All of the regulations that pertain to high merit buildings, which the Optimist building is one, are available. So it's to me, despite the fact that I have a lot of respect for Mr. Klitzing and Lux Development and for the Optimists, at the end of the day, we have urban planning for a reason, and this is urban planning at its core. You know, the city spent years identifying buildings that should, in this particular case, mid-century modern design buildings that should not be demolished, that should be protected because they're significant. And you know, to target one of these buildings for a new development and then come back and say, we can't make this work, or we didn't know, or, you know, it's been on the market. Yeah, that's true. I get all of that. But as a community, we have identified our cultural heritage, our architectural heritage, and it goes way beyond the here and now. It goes to future generations. When these mid-century designs were being built in St. Louis, the Victorian architecture that we value so highly today was considered obsolete, was considered passé, was considered not something that was worthy of preservation. And as a result, we demolished thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of buildings that today, you know, current generations would consider to be very valuable and very attractive. And well, I don't want to repeat myself, but you know, at the end of the day, the city went to the trouble to identify buildings that fit into a particular category. I whittled it down from a huge, huge pool of buildings, identified the most significant of those buildings, and this is one of them. And so I would just pose the question to the commission, to the board, why do we engage in these planning processes if we're not going to adhere to the recommendations that they provide? And also, once again, just to bring you back around, I know that this is an attractive building, in my opinion, but that doesn't matter. The thing that matters is the ordinance, the applicable ordinances. And the applicable ordinance states unequivocally that high merit buildings, of which this is one, shall not be approved for demolition. And so just to close, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there are any, I applaud the work that Lux Living has done and will continue to do in St. Louis. I applaud their commitment to development in St. Louis and their investment in the community. They're a great community partner. Mr. Klitzing has done a wonderful job, I think, you know, in this initial design. But at the end of the day, my understanding of the role of the Preservation Board is to interpret and apply the applicable ordinances. And in this case, the ordinance says that a sound high merit building shall not be approved for demolition. And I'll close with that. Thank you for humoring me.
Thank you. Bethany?
Next, we have John Gunther.
Hello and good evening. My name is John Gunther. I'm an architect and I'm also the president of the Society of Architectural Historians, St. Louis chapter. I have submitted a letter to you for your review and consideration prior to this, but I'd like to review a few key points regarding the Optimist International Club building. It is one of great importance and significance, and one that defines the era. This high merit building features dramatic, expressive structural columns, triangular in profile, supporting floor and roof slabs, which provide protection for the stone veneered walls and vertical windows. Its form is simultaneously both restrained and powerful as it holds the corner site. It was placed on the significant properties list, one of 25 by the Cultural Resource Office, and as noted, from a list of 2,300 down to a list of 25, it is in the top 1% of those buildings considered. If allowed to be demolished, it would represent a severe loss and erosion of St. Louis mid-century modern architecture. The Optimist International Building, along with the Engineers Club of St. Louis, the Chancery of the Archdiocese of St. Louis, and the AAA building, form a cluster of iconic mid-century buildings and a strategic spine along Lindell Boulevard, east of Forest Park between Vandeventer and Kingshighway. So we can't just think about just this one site, but what is its part in the overall composition? It could be recommended for historic designation due to the significance associated with the St. Louis modern era. It could also be eligible for listing on the National Register under Criterion C. Should demolition be granted, this will set a precedent for demolition of the Engineers Club of St. Louis building and other buildings of high merit in the future. So please consider this very carefully. Lastly, I just want to say I did attend one of the community meetings on June 29th to find out more about the developer's plans for the Optimist International Club building. When I asked if the developer and his architect had prepared a detailed study to accommodate the program requirements for the proposed apartment development, or to see how much of the program would be accommodated by adaptively reusing the existing building, the answer was they looked at it just long enough to know they wanted to tear the building down and to build a new apartment building. Without a detailed study for adaptive reuse, no one will ever know if the entire existing building, with or without an addition, or a significant portion of the original building, possibly with an addition, could work. I urge you to deny demolition and preserve the Optimist International Club building. There's just but one chance to get this right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Jim Dwyer.
They're unmuted, and I will respect the cat video admonition of the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Dwyer.
Thank you for the admonition. I'll cut it short. Each of you hopefully has received, and hopefully if you have not already, will read the submission that came over my hand from the Central West End Association Planning and Development Committee. There are details in there that I think are worth considering, but I think I can cut my testimony short by saying that aside from all the hyperbole about why the building is no good, aside from all the testimony about how many letters have been received from hundreds of people and how everybody is so enthusiastic about what the developer has proposed, that none of that is relevant. This isn't a popularity contest. As John just said, and as Andrew before him said, this is a matter of whether existing standards that have been well documented, well in advance of this conversation today, independent of it, whether they will be recognized, honored, and whether they will prevail. And so others have said it better than I, but the bottom line is there is the prospect, at least, of being able to redevelop this site in a much more intensive way. There is the opportunity to generate tax revenue by putting the property into the hands of something other than a not-for-profit. That is laudable and a laudable objective. Hopefully it would be done, as Mr. Alston has suggested, without incentives as well. All of that is important to consider. But what matters in the end is that a responsible, thoughtful developer could find a way to incorporate the existing corner building 4494 into the design of something new that would be beneficial to us all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Next, we have Jim Zimmerman.
Hello. I'll just take a second. I'm a resident of Lindell Terrace, which is catty-corner to the Optimist International building. In fact, our unit overlooks the site. As a rule, I'm certainly not somebody who looks at tearing buildings down for no reason. I will grant that the building is somewhat unique. I don't think it's as inspiring as I've heard others, but that's I'm not an architect. I'm just a neighbor. My biggest concern is that while I've heard lots of discussion of, gee, it'd be great to redevelop it, make it more a contributor to the neighborhood than it is today. The reality sounds like that, for almost a decade now, it's been on the market and nobody's grabbing that bait, and that without substantial investment and maybe these groups that have been talking, the preservationist, if they have the funds to go in and help support all that, more power to it, to turn it into a building that contributes with the vitality of the neighborhood. My wife and I moved to the West End about 4 years ago. We are excited to be residents in this area. We like the density and encourage more density for the energy and the vitality and the safety it brings to our area. So while I hate to see it necessarily go, if it can't be developed and we've got a wonderful looking project that could replace it, I would be in favor of seeing it go. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have John Warren.
Hi, thank you so much. My name is John Warren. I'm the listing broker with Cushman & Wakefield that represents the Optimist Club. So many of you will obviously think I'm biased here, but also as a lifelong, as a resident of the Central West End for a number of years, right behind the site of the Executive House building. My grandparents lived on Pershing Place, so I grew up in the area and know it well. The reality is this, there have been numerous attempts, numerous groups that have looked at this building, like everyone has said at length, to explore either redeveloping the building as is, which ultimately did not make sense economically, or the goal with Covington was to tear the building down and have that building replace it with a new tower. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I consider myself a building preservationist myself. I am a historic preservation urban planning major, so I appreciate what the board is doing here, as well as the Landmarks Association, Andrew Weil. Those were great comments as well. But at the end of the day, sometimes it does make sense to replace the building with something I think would be superior, rather than keeping the existing building, which might be somewhat inferior. If you look at the Citizen Park building, I had someone, I think it was Betsy Bradley from the Cultural Review Office, say that she preferred that the American Heart Association building stay located at the corner of Euclid and Lindell. Certainly, I think everyone would argue today that the addition of Citizen Park is far better for the Central West End, connects the two sides of the Central West End, and has been a huge contributing property to the area. If you look at the Orion building in the Central West End, you could have made the argument that, well, gee, that's a 1940s medical tower. That's also worth historically preserving. There's also the Salon building in downtown Clayton. There used to be a medical office on that site, 1950s modern design that was ultimately removed for the new Salon apartment building that went in with retail and apartments above. I could go on and on. I would say that the Library Limited site in Clayton's another example of a 1950s, 60s modern department store building, which was later Library Limited. You know, you could argue, well, that shouldn't be torn down for the Centene building. So at the end of the day, sometimes you do kind of give up for buildings for something that's better in its spot. I went to that mid-century modern survey. I went through every single one. I think the American Heart Association building was on that as well, which ultimately was removed for a new quality infill building. And at the end of the day, there are no viable groups, no preservation groups that want to buy this building, save the pavilion, make it into a Class A office space, a restaurant, or so forth. At the end of the day, if this is denied, what will likely happen is we'll end up selling it to a Class C office user or Class C church group. So I don't think that is the highest and best use for the site in the Central West End at Lindell and Taylor. In that group that Alderman Sweet Tea Pyle referenced, Idea Alliance Organization, they've never called me to tour the building. They've never made an offer for the building. And when I met with her after, because she did briefly speak at one of the open houses, she said that she had, quote, no money to buy the building yet. So in terms of active other opportunities to redevelop the building as is, there are none. So I do get occasional calls from church groups in the city. I don't think that's the best fit for this property. A part of me, I see that the columns are somewhat interesting and so forth, but at the end of the day, a high dense use versus kind of a somewhat auto-centric building in the Central West End would be far, far superior to the current building. That's all.
Thank you.
Next, we have Chris Stritzel.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Chris Stritzel. I am a young resident of the city of St. Louis, and I work in the city of St. Louis. And I would like to first say that I classify myself as a preservationist. You know, I've had a hand, I'd say, in a few preservation efforts in St. Louis, 1500 South Grand, the Shanley building in Clayton, even though that was a pretty, small building there, that was significant, is what Harris Armstrong designed. And then most recently, south of downtown, the 700 block of South 4th Street, one of the last few intact blocks in that part of downtown. I pushed hard to get it preserved, and we're working on a plan for that. But to go back here to this project, I would like to reiterate the point that the Komen Group proposed several years ago a redevelopment of the building for a singular office tenant. That plan did fall apart due to the tenant backing out, and they did not get the TIF that they were requesting that they would get. But I would like to make the point that after that redevelopment would have been done, the project would have left the building as is. Really, the only thing that would have been left of it of significance were the columns on the outside walls. It would have been a completely new building built out of the shell of the old. Komen Group tried to undertake that. I know it had support by many people, but unfortunately it did fall apart, and there has not been anybody who has come forward. And I think the 6 years since that has been proposed and got canceled to do that exact same thing, which I know a lot of people would like to do. I'd also like to make the comment that the city of St. Louis is turning a curve in our history. We're getting ready to grow for the first time in decades, and we need developers to keep up with the demand for housing, or else housing prices will continue to rise across the board. I know, and I see it on social media, and I see it in the news, and I see other things. People are concerned by the way our housing prices are rising here. St. Louis should take pride in being a very affordable city to live in. Unfortunately, though, as demand keeps crawling up, the housing prices are going to continue. If we do not build more housing here in this city, we're going to continue seeing housing prices rise. It's basic economics, and it makes basic sense. You have to meet with demand, or else, prices will continue going up. So I believe that saying goes along the lines of, to gain some, you have to lose some. And this is one of those cases. You are losing a building of, as some have described it, high architectural merit for a building that will add 150 new apartments to one of our best neighborhoods, our showcase neighborhood in the city of St. Louis, the most walkable neighborhood in the city of St. Louis. And if we don't what does this building contribute, the current building? What does it contribute to the walkability factor of the neighborhood? It doesn't contribute much at all. There's no ground floor activation. Quite frankly, it's ugly. I'm sorry for those who disagree with me on that, but that's how I feel it. It's nothing much beyond a few columns, and that's it. That's all people are wanting to save, I think. And that's fine with that. And then we're also in a time in our history where citizens across the board, including the mayor and the new SLDC director, would like to move away from issuing incentives to luxury developments in our best and brightest neighborhoods. This project does not seek tax incentives. This is a great example of what can happen in a neighborhood moving forward. To get a property that's been off the tax rolls for decades and to get it into the hands of a private developer who will pay hundreds of thousands of dollars in years in taxes that will go towards helping students at the public school district, the public safety department, roads, infrastructure, you name it. This is just the first example of what I would hope would be many more projects in the neighborhood to choose that path. We have to start moving away from those tax incentives, and we have to start getting creative about our future. I know people want to see the current building saved. I know they want to see it incorporated into something else, but please, we are not at that point to require developers to get that creative. And to be honest with you, it's a shame for me to say that, but we're not on the level of Seattle. We're not on the level of Nashville. We're not on the level of Austin, where they are literally plowing down many old buildings for these faceless high rises that all look the same, stacked blocks. We're not here yet. We still have a lot of our historic heritage left. This building that's currently there at 4494 Lindell is not one of those, in my opinion, that should be preserved and incorporated into a building for future usage for all the reasons I named. So that's all I'd like to say.
Thank you.
Next, we have Kim McCarthy.
Hello, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Kim McCarthy. I'm currently a resident at the Chelsea, one of the Lux Living properties in the Central West End. And one thing I want to add is that this building has added a sense of community to my life in St. Louis, as well as added to the neighborhood itself. A lot of my friends in the building, we go to the local restaurants, we shop at the local stores, and we want to expand the economy here. One thing I've also noticed, I've been in St. Louis for 8 years, is St. Louis recently was in an article by Time magazine that said we are one of the greatest of 100 cities in the world. And part of that was the revitalization of the downtown area, including the City Foundry, the soccer stadium, and other new businesses and things that are being brought to it. And I think we want to continue the positive trend in the media of growing St. Louis to a place that people want to be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Michael Grass.
Hello, hi. You guys hear me? I will try to keep my comments brief. I feel like a lot of them have kind of been covered by somebody else. I don't know much about the way the preservation board works, but I'm a little surprised that so much stock is being put in this survey that was done several years ago. And I appreciate the chair putting the link to the actual survey in the comments. There a lot of faith is that this is high merit, and we've heard that this is clearly established as high merit. But the methodology of the survey, it looks like they hired some architecture firm from Oregon, and that person just drove around and looked at a bunch of buildings and said, these are the ones I like the best. And it says, there's no methodology in here. It's just the consultant along with CRO staff. And I just feel like it is, forgive me for saying it, but it's just absurd to turn away hundreds of new city residents and a tax in a property that's going to generate property tax compared to something that's not, based on the primary authority being a survey that was completed years ago by, a consultant from Oregon and a bunch of nameless CRO staff. I'm a big believer that the Central West End is historic because of the people that live in the Central West End. I don't think that and as far as the architecture of the Central West End, it's not a mid-century modern neighborhood. I mean, we can pick and choose a couple of these mid-century modern buildings, but I live at 4480 Maryland. I can see the Optimist building from my backyard all of the houses on my street were built 1901. All the houses in our neighborhoods were built early 1900s. And looking at the new building, I mean, I feel like the new building almost fits, you know, better with the character of the neighborhood than this, you know, building that was built in the 60s. So, you know, that's about it. Like I said, I didn't want to take much time, but, you know, I really don't think that the city is, and I will also want to echo my friend Jim Zimmerman's comments that, you know, this is a safety issue. We need people in the city. We need liveliness in the city. And, you know, I don't want to turn that away based off of, you know, some survey that we hired some architect from Oregon to do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Jack Abba. Mr. Abba? You want me to go to the next one?
We'll
Yes,
return to this. Whoops, there's Jack.
Okay.
Proceed, Mr. Abba.
Hello, my name is Gabler from Washington University, St. Louis.
Mr. Abba, it sounds like you're Can you alter your technology somehow?
No. Can I put what I want to say in writing?
Nope, not any better. Bethany, call the next person, please.
Next would be Jerry Schlichter.
Oh, well.
Thanks, everybody. And I want to thank Chairman Callow and all of you members for the time and interest you're showing in this matter. I'm a very long time. I'm not a young person like Michael. I'm a longtime resident of the Central West End for decades, lived 5 blocks away from the building, and have been deeply, deeply involved in historic preservation for many years. I wrote the state historic tax credit to revitalize our city, put together a coalition of great preservationists and people who cared about their communities. And we worked the hallways of Jefferson City, not only to get it passed, but then for the last 20 years, I fought to keep it for what it is because of the vital importance of our historic preservation in the city's economy and vitality. I've also been a member of Landmarks Association and a supporter for many years as well, and have received preservation awards. So what I think, I'm not an architect or an architectural historian, and I think what most people would agree on is that St. Louis's history, wonderful history of historic buildings, both commercial and residential, is turn of the century or early in the 20th century buildings. We're not noted around the country. We are noted for that. It's our best asset. We're not noted around the country for mid-century modern architecture like newer cities might be. And while this, I guess, is on this list, you know, as a lay person who's not an architectural historian or an architect, I think this is true of most of my neighbors, this building doesn't really hit you as particularly historic. The average person wouldn't put anything like the value on this building that you would on wonderful historic buildings that are 100 years old, or even some of the other mid-century buildings, such as the AAA building and some others. So that's just a layperson's view, but I think it's the view of most people. In my opinion, it's clear nothing's going to happen with this building other than continued deterioration if you turn this down. You have the owner of the building here who has no axe to grind, having saying it's obsolete and has all this deferred maintenance. And I think at some point, those who oppose the demolition have an obligation to suggest what's their plan, what's their idea, what's their specific proposal that would make something happen with the building. It's nothing but speculation. And we don't need even the word of Lux for that. They've said that. The owner of the building says it. It's 8 years of history. The proof of the pudding that nothing's going to happen is what's not happened for the last 8 years when they've been trying to sell it. And there was a proposal, I remember the 14-story building at this location that was rejected. So after that, did a bunch of developers come forward to do it? No. Then when Coleman came forward to keep it as is, that didn't pan out. So we're at the point of last resort as I see it. And if for those who are worried about precedent, what you could say here, I guess, is that this isn't going to set the precedent this would set if it is allowed to be demolished, is that buildings that have some architectural value, but you would only allow demolition of such buildings if it took 7 years of no buyers, no developers who can make something happen. Developers have been rejected because they want incentives. The buyer says it's obsolete, and the owner the owner says it's obsolete, and the owner is not paying taxes, and the new owner would pay taxes, plus no incentives. So if we're going to establish a precedent, we could apply that standard, and if they don't meet all those tests, then say the building shouldn't be demolished. But here, all those tests are met, and that's the only precedent it would set here. So the bottom line for me and neighbors, a lot of them haven't weighed in, but fellow members of the neighborhood just think this is a no-brainer in terms of what the best outcome for the city is, and that's to have this new building with the vitality it brings. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Jonathan Gabler.
Hi, yes. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, yes. So just a little bit about me. Like I said, I'm Jonathan Gabler. I am a software engineer here in the St. Louis area. The couple comments I wanted to make on this was from the standpoint of the future that this new development can offer the city. In the past, there's been numerous articles that have gone out saying that St. Louis is the next tech hub, has an opportunity to be the next tech hub. We have cheap land, we have cheap electricity, we have cost of living is down for housing and rent compared to all other tech areas in the nation pretty much. We've had a couple of good companies come out here. We had Square come out here. If you look at the proposal for a Square company, one of the biggest concerns they had was where are our employees going to live? Is it safe? Is it modern? Is it something that our employees are going to live at for us to move out here? Example, that one went through, thankfully. Example one didn't go through was we had the Amazon HQ2. One of the biggest concerns there was where are they going to live? The current building that we have now, like I said, it really cannot be vitalized to that new standard that the young professionals are looking at. Young professionals in the tech and engineering world, we're looking for something that has all the amenities that we're going to need. We work crazy hours, we work all the time. We want everything to be conveniently located. We also want to provide though to the city as well. So we want to shop local to provide support to small businesses. The current owner right now is a nonprofit who, like I said, is not paying taxes on the resident. So they're not really generating anything for the city. You had mentioned that another nonprofit was looking into purchase a building, but again, that provides nothing to the city as well. And what are the odds that nonprofit also has the funds to ramp up the building and maintain the building and also their goal? The current nonprofit there is a really great nonprofit that could use that funds to provide scholarships that one, I was able to get, not through them directly, but through other organizations that provided me to go to college and, expand my career. So they have the chance to use those funds for good. They cannot do that though right now if, they continue to sell this property. 8 years of they've been trying to sell this property. I can understand, I love historic buildings, and there are many buildings around St. Louis that, if you think about it, they are staples of St. Louis. This building, though, is not one of those buildings, in my opinion, and this building also has been sitting for a long time. If it was 1 to 2 years, okay, sure, let's wait a little bit longer. But 8 years, this building has been sitting for sale, and you have not had someone to buy this building at the moment. So it is my opinion that we allow a new development to generate not only jobs to work on a building, to generate the income, but we also allow them to generate the taxes and provide the city so the city can use the funds to better expand for other services in the city. We need to expand the housing in St. Louis if we want to become the next tech hub. If we want to attract the young professionals, they want these new modern places to live. Historically small places, yes, they look nice, but you can only fit half the amount of people in them. If you get to the larger construction buildings, you can attract more talent, which attracts more people paying taxes, which in the end helps the city more overall. That's pretty much all the comments I have on that.
Thank you.
Next, we have Imran Hanafi.
All right, can you guys hear me? You're very familiar with me. I show up at the Preservation Board meetings and always have a passionate plea about demolishing historic buildings. So as a preservationist, I think a lot of the same arguments are being made, you know, nobody wants this building, nobody wants to renovate it, so let's tear it down and do the next best thing. For me, I feel like I'm selling my soul a little bit here because I love Victorian historic architecture because apart from the craftsmanship, there's a sense of how it embraces community and togetherness. And I guess mid-century modern was a reaction to that idea. So there's a lot of separation and coldness. So the building is very cool. I think it would make an amazing like boutique hotel or something if somebody with vision came along. But as somebody who walks by it a lot, especially the Taylor elevation, there's this fortress-like rejection of anybody who's outside, as if you're trying to protect whatever goes on inside. And that's the part which really made me change my mind on the Lux project. I mean, the amount of windows and the amount of street activation and having the community connection within and without. I think that if you're going to allow a demolition of a historically prominent building, I guess that would be a reasonable argument. I mean, I protested the San Luis demolition. That was a very different matter because we got a parking lot and trees. And so I completely understand the arguments for preservation. And so these are my two ambivalent cents, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Cabiny Howard.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for letting me talk. I've found this conversation really eye-opening, and I came ready to listen and hear both sides. As a longtime resident of the West End, I've been here 10 years, grew up on Westminster, and now live 2 blocks away from the Optimist. And as I listen to everyone, I think it's just an example of how life is full of impossible questions. But this one really feels to me like we have to think about progress. And even though it's hard to choose between growth and density on that corner, the more I think about coming up on 10 years of nothingness, I look at the architectural significance of the roundhouse across the street, and I vehemently oppose that. It's absolutely gorgeous. I can see that the architectural significance was well worth anything that promoted density or high rises or office use. So I look at that building, and that's the same architect as that did the AAA building. And I think those are no brainers, but I too agree with Jerry and now the gentleman who spoke before me, is that as an art history major, I'm extremely appreciative. I live in a 1904 Tudor on Pershing Place, and I just absolutely love the significance of the architecture and think it's a huge part of why the Central West End is so attractive. But have you been through the Chelsea? Because that is what the future is asking for. And if we're going to be moving with the rest of the country toward attracting talent, as Jonathan mentioned. I think that there's real merit in looking at this opportunity and saying, while difficult, I acknowledge it's very difficult to have to balance preservation with growth, but this one to me really does seem like a chance to say, we have an impossible question before us, but the developer is going to do it without that building or not do the project at all. And that's the decision that we have to make. And I am very much in favor of moving forward with a project that the Cultural Review Board can say, while you want to keep the building and build on it, is there a way for Vic and his team to be able to come to you with something that's palatable that does not include the existing structure? Because it sounds like that's a non-starter. So 2 blocks away, I pass it all the time. I would gravely miss walking by the roundhouse next to the cathedral. I would miss seeing the AAA building. I would fight hard for those. I definitely want to go on record as saying I would be okay with this project moving forward. And thank you guys for this really, I think, productive and healthy conversation.
Thank you.
Next, we have Tyler Stevens.
Good evening, everyone. I wrote my response in a letter to Jan, so I won't go over the nuances of all that, but just to say that I am generally in favor of new development as long as it contributes to the city architecturally. This building was a new development at one point in time, and I'm sure it tore down some older significant buildings in order to be built. But that is the nature of architectural progress in any growing city. I hope that the Alderwoman is still on here on the call, because I applaud what she was getting at, which is she put in a great plug for architects that our creativity is to solve these problems. This is a conversation that happens all over our city, and it's two forces that are opposed to one another, one being economic growth and the other being historic preservation. Often difficult to solve, but I do think that there are solutions that are viable. However, in this particular one, the developer mentioned that it was going to be the first development in the West End to not seek tax incentives. And I'm wondering if the Alderwoman would support tax incentives in order to have that compromise solution, something that would save the pavilion part of the structure, but yet let the rest of the site be developed. Because I know that solution could be done architecturally, however, it would be more expensive. And so it's going to be economically difficult. I think that if the city is serious about saving these buildings, then we're going to have to put some economic incentives behind them in order to have that happen. So if she is still on, I would like to hear a response if she would support such.
No, we're actually not going to do that.
Okay, well, then just let it be a statement of, I think that's where the city needs to go.
That's how I took it.
Thank you.
Next, we have Darlene B. Darlene?
Let's try next.
Okay. Next, we have Tommy Belt.
Hi, my name is Tommy Belt, and I represent Max Bar and Grill on Pershing and the corner of Belt, which is my street. We have seen our business increase probably 5-fold just from one of the buildings in Dimension would be Tribeca across the street. A lot of people enjoy food, dining there, drinking there, having meetings there. We actually just leased another 3,000 square feet of space right next to the building, and we are building out to the tune between probably $100,000 to maybe $200,000 investment for that building to house more meetings, more places for people to hold social functions, business functions, and things of that nature. So we see this as a win. The neighborhood is growing. There's no reason to stop that growth. We are hiring people to work in our place of business. We see a lot of people come with their laptops and things like that and do business from home because of the situation that's going on. But I think it's a good development. And I love history as well. I love buildings as well. I'm not from that particular area, but I do enjoy the history that I see in the buildings and the architecture that are around. But when you see a building that needs repair and they are unable to fund that repair, then you have somebody who wants to buy that building and fix that up. It's a shame to see it go down, but they offer no tax revenue for us at all. So I think us as businesses that are trying to increase our businesses, trying to increase our space for people to come and enjoy, that are providing those taxes, other places should do the same thing. I'm all for nonprofits. I support nonprofits. I support the Optimist as well. But if they're able to do what they're doing in a smaller capacity space-wise, and somebody else can develop this for more people to come and bring more business in, small tech, and things like that, then let's let them do their small retail and their small office space, and let's help, bring that tax base back into Central West End. I saw a comment earlier that there are lots of neighborhoods and lots of lots that they could develop someplace else, but why not do that in our own backyard? Again, our business itself is growing. We have taken on an additional lease of space for growth that's happening in the area. It's a hot area. A lot of people want to be in the Central West End. It's one of the hottest places in St. Louis. Reading all kinds of reviews all the time. So that's why we made the further investment. We think this would be a good investment as well by bringing in another business, allowing them to use their small shops, their small businesses, their small restaurants to keep people in the Central West End. So we're looking forward to it. We're for it. We're promoting it. And we hope this goes through. Again, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Next, we have Alicia Brockland. Alicia? Okay, next we have Tim Rice.
Good evening to everybody. Can you hear me?
We can.
Thank you. I live at 4440 Lindell. I am president of the Pierre Chouteau Condominium Board. And basically, after hearing everybody else, I appreciate everything that the cultural resource does. I'm very much into historical preservation of every kind, including putting our building back the way that it was once, when there was so much pieces ruined in the building over the years from, deferred maintenance or trying to do everything on the cheap. And I doing this amount of work, it is a lot of work. I have two feelings about this building. I appreciate the building itself, but at the same time, I also know what it takes to run a building. And what people forget, I believe, in my opinion, is that when you get into plumbing, electrical especially, we've had so much that we've had to do here. And a lot of the plumbing in these buildings, people think plumbing's plumbing. No, it's not. It's a very, very intricate, a lot of these buildings have very intricate plumbing systems, very expensive plumbing systems. My fear with that building is that because it's been on the market for the last 8 years, it's going to continue to be on the market for the last 8 years. And I feel that with the way this building is, it really isn't feasible because of the size of the building. If the building was a 5 or 6 story building all the way around, that would be a little bit different as far as making it a viable project. It's not. And my second feeling my second opinion here is that I've watched this building go down over the years since we live here. We put a lot of money into our building in order to maintain it, in order to maintain the yard, in order to do the foliage and the flowers and what have you. I see a yard full of clover, weeds in the cracks, an ugly sign on the corner. And I get what everybody's trying to do, and I so appreciate it. I really do. You have no idea. And I'm for that. But I will just simply end this by, I told Vic about it. It was an article from a 1939 double edition of Fortune magazine. And it talks about death and taxes. And it talks about 9 streets throughout the world, including Belgrave Square in London, Boulevard Saint-Germain in Paris, Rockwood Boulevard in Washington, Spokane, and it mentions St. Louis. There is Lindell Boulevard, and it says every city, every town in the world has a street or a district in which it is accounted a special privilege to live. In New York, Fifth Avenue has been that street. So we were compared to Fifth Avenue. Personally, I don't feel that that building contributes what they knew, or what Lindell Boulevard was, the vision in those days. I think that a new building of this sort, with the vibrancy, the tax revenue, and the amount of residents, will greatly attribute to the Lindell Boulevard experience. So I appreciate everybody's input and everybody's help, and I thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, that is the last of everyone I have on the list, but I do want to call the two people we missed earlier. Do we have Darlene B. or Alicia Brockland on?
Yes.
There's a couple waiting. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, are you Alicia?
I'm on as Alicia Brockland.
Okay.
Sorry, and who are you?
My name's Brian Taki. I'm actually Alicia's fiance, and she's the one that handles the phone calls.
I bet she's better at the audio than you are.
Hello?
Perfect, go ahead.
Oh, am I on the phone? So we moved into the Central West End about a year ago, and absolutely fell in love with
Bethany, I'm sorry, this is not actually doing anything. Can you cut the audio off that?
Yes.
Okay. Anybody else?
Darlene B.
Okay, thank you very much. Commissioners, that concludes the people we have signed up for this meeting. Jan, did you want to add something?
Hello? You can't turn it off. I don't know what it's on. Yeah. It's not him.
Bethany?
Hello?
Brian, we can hear you, but you're on an echo.
No, this is showing mute.
There you go.
Oh, okay, now we got me. Sorry. I do the handiwork at the house, not the technology. So I apologize. But what I was trying to say is, I really appreciate Commissioner Callow and everybody from Cultural Resources and the effort that goes into preserving and maintaining the beauty of the Central West End. I grew up in Baldwin, and we didn't know anything like this existed. There's nothing like the West End west of the West End, and I think that it's the duty and the privilege of this organization to preserve that, because to us, what's amazing is what you think of what this place must have looked like in the late 1890s, in the early 1900s. We walk up and down Kingsbury and Waterman and Pershing, and just picture the horses and the scaffolding and just the energy and the life. I think what's most awesome about what we've seen with some of the recent development, the Chelsea went up basically in my backyard. I almost looked directly at the building. We attended its opening, and a few weeks later, I hear from my best friend who lives Babe, what's AJ's address? Westmoreland. And I hear from his younger brother, who's in his early 20s, that everybody his age is talking about these new buildings that are going up. They're all excited to try to move into the Central West End. These are the kids that are coming out of college. They're young professionals that are going to carry this place to the next generation. What is exciting is to see buildings like this being proposed. I tell you, if there was anything that could be salvaged with the existing structure, I think it would have already been done. And it's an eyesore. That building is ugly. I'm sorry, everybody I think agrees. There's some pillars up front, but I think 150 unit luxury apartment complex would much better serve the community. You've got the owner of the building that wants to get out. You've got the developer that's ready to pull the trigger. You've got testimony from local businesses and from plenty of residents. So that's it. Thank you for putting up with all the technology issues, but I appreciate being heard.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Jan Cameron.
Yes. I have one thing I'd like to clarify. I don't think I made very clear in my presentation was that the rehabilitation of the Optimist property would be eligible for historic tax credits if it were listed on the National Register or added to the certified local district. Both of those processes our office can assist in. So.
Great, thank you very much. Commissioners, this concludes the testimony that has signed up for this matter. Commissioner Richardson, are you still on? Commissioner Richardson, are you still on? Okay. Commissioner Fathman, are you still on?
Yes, I am.
Have you got a motion, Melanie?
Yes, I do.
Proceed.
Right. I would recommend that the Preservation Board withhold preliminary approval of the proposed demolition as the Optimist International is a high merit building under the Preservation Review Ordinance, a contributing resource to the Central West End Historic District, and an element of the historic architecture that's significant to the city of St. Louis.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, could you clarify the motion? I didn't hear a motion. I just heard a statement.
If you look on agenda item C on your agenda, the recommendation, the motion she read was the recommendation of staff.
Oh, okay, great.
Any discussion? Commissioners, is it clear what we're voting on? Okay, there is a motion on the floor that's been made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed signify by saying no.
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 No. Any abstentions? Okay, commissioners, I can't tell from this where it is. I'm going to call a roll. Commissioner Fathman, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no? Commissioner Killeen, do you vote yes or no?
I didn't hear Commissioner Hamilton's vote.
I didn't either. That's why I called you.
Oh, yes, sir. I'm a no.
Commissioner Richardson, do you vote yes or no? Commissioner Weber, do you vote yes or no?
I abstain.
Commissioner Coder, do you vote yes or no?
No.
Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no? Commissioner Richardson, I'm sorry.
Chairman, I think Commissioner Hamilton is voting no in the chat. I don't know how that works.
The chat does not constitute a record. Commissioner Hamilton, if you can hear this, call in. Commissioner Richardson, yes or no?
Yes.
We'll hold for a minute for Commissioner Hamilton.
Is she muted? Is Commissioner Hamilton muted?
She says in the chat that her audio is messed up.
So we could give her a phone number to call.
Well, she can hear us. We just asked her to call in.
I know what number though.
I have the number.
Yeah. Okay.
You can call in at 312-626-6799.
Oh, really? Okay.
Tiffany, I'll send that to you as well.
Bethany, do we have Commissioner Hamilton's vote on the record?
We don't have it on the record. She put it in the chat. I did give her the number to call in though.
Would you call her directly?
Myself or from the meeting? I don't think I can call her from the meeting.
Right. Can you call her directly yourself?
I will try.
Thank you. Thank everybody for their patience. The technology has been mostly our friend.
Mr. Chairman,
Who's speaking?
Weber. Can one change a vote that they've already made?
Did you vote in error?
I voted in error by abstaining, yes.
Okay. What is your vote? Yes or no?
No, my vote is no. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Chairman, I have her.
Okay, my vote's no. Hear me?
Did you hear that?
Yes. Okay. The chair casts a vote yes, creating 4 yeses, 4 noes. The motion fails. Is there another motion?
Chairman, I'll make a motion if they'll recognize me.
Who is this?
Alderman Coder.
Yes, sir. You're recognized to make a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that the Preservation Board grant preliminary approval to the proposed demolition of the Optimist International and direct the applicant to work on final details with staff.
Second.
Motion made and seconded.
Alderman Coder, usually when we have something like this, we require the applicant to get a building permit in hand before they do any demolition. Would you consider?
I would amend my motion to request that the Preservation Board grant preliminary approval to the proposed demolition once the applicant has obtained a demolition permit and worked on final design with staff.
Does the second agree?
I agree. I second.
Okay. Commissioners, I will call a roll again. There is a motion on the floor that has been made and seconded. Actually made, seconded, amended, and seconded. Alderman Coder, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Weber, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson, do you vote yes or no?
No.
Commissioner Killeen, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no?
No.
Commissioner Fathman, do you vote yes or no?
No.
Chair votes no, and the motion fails. Do I hear another motion? Do I hear a motion to defer consideration of this until our next meeting?
So moved.
I'll
Is there a
second that.
Is there any opposition? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, calling agenda item D, please. 320 to 332 South 21st Street.
Oh, sorry. Jan Cameron, Cultural Resources. This is another preliminary review application for the rehabilitation of this building, which is known as Union Square or 320-32 South 21st Street, and is located in the Union Station Landmark District. Next, Bethany. And here is part, at least, of the Union Station District. The building is in the dotted outline. It is there similarly to the prior preliminary review. The standards for this rehabilitation are the Secretary of the Interior standards for the treatment of historic properties. However, it was actually adopted into the ordinance that created the landmark district. So, but the review is the same, except that we're looking in this particular instance as a rehabilitation instead of new construction. Next. The proposal is to rehabilitate this building as a new home offices of the St. Louis SC, and it will become a place of venue as well, I believe, with meetings and other things. But the architects for the project can go into that in more detail if you're interested. But primarily, it will denote its historic industrial character, but it will also be, there will be some changes to it in order to connect it to the vocabulary of the proposed stadium. And one of the great things about the rehabilitation is that the reflective windows will be removed and replica industrial sash will replace them. I mean, there will be functional industrial sash, but it will replicate the appearance of industrial sash. And that's one of the great goals of my whole career, is to get that done. So in any case, the staff is recommending approval of what was proposed, with a couple of small exceptions. Bethany, next. This is the proposal. And you can see that they're maintaining the historic canopy over the front elevation, which is what we're looking at here, which actually faces faces east. Next. The one change would be to this elevation, which faces north and will face towards the stadium. This elevation was originally attached to another building, as I think you can see from the photograph, and it's fairly unarticulated. So the proposal is to insert a new element into it that will not detract from the character of the existing building as an industrial building, but relate to the stadium. Next. And that is it. The staff had some initial concerns about this, but we figured that this is an unarticulated elevation. It faces away, and it was agreed that it was important to relate this building in some way to the stadium. So this is a proposed bay window, and again, the architects will go into more detail about this, but we asked them to darken the ribs of here, the muttons and ribs here, so that the industrial character was carried over into this side as well. Next. These are details of the existing canopies. Right now, I believe the proposal is for this canopy on the left to be removed, which is a remnant of an original building connection that no longer exists. Staff feels that's an important element, and we would like to see it retained or replicated or memorialized in some way, because this will become the new entry to the parking for the building. On the left, the main campus will be covered with a pierced metal awning fabric that will allow the structure of the canopy to be perceivable from the outside. Next. And just to show you how really remote this building is from everything, this is the railroad tracks. We're looking south here towards the highway, and that's the front elevation on your right. Next. This is looking south towards the building from the Drury parking garage, I should say. Sorry. Next. And this is looking towards it from Clark Street. And this will be where the addition is. You can see the proximity to an unmovable power station. Next. And this is how the south elevation is perceived currently at ground level. You can see it better from the highway above. Next. Next. Sorry. Again, the building to the left and the under construction stadium to the right. So the staff is recommending that preliminary review be granted, subject to reconsideration of retaining the canopy, which you can see in the left slide, and that final documents, design details, and materials and treatments be reviewed by the Cultural Resources Office staff. Questions?
Questions for Jan? Okay, then, is the applicant present?
I am. This is Jeff Ryan. I'm architect and design principal at Christner Architects.
Okay, proceed.
Okay.
We have your presentation queued up, I think. Bethany.
Okay, super. Thanks, Jan.
There you go.
And I have quite a lot of slides here. I know this meeting has gone pretty long, so I'm going to try to go through these as efficiently as possible.
I appreciate the efficiency, but it's not nearly our longest meeting.
Okay. Well, then I applaud the dedication of this board to the city. This is quite an effort from you, from all of you. Okay, so next slide, please. So today, our slides, we're going to just basically give you an overview of the building today as it stands today. I know Jan's already touched on some of this. We've done some historical research. We'd like to share some of the things we found out about the building and doing that. Talk about city soccer club and their ambitions for the stadium and the district. And then we want to get into our architectural approach, how we plan to preserve the building, and then how we plan to integrate new elements, and why we think the dialogue between those two is really interesting and important in the city. So next slide, please. So this is aerial view looking at Union Square to the right. That's in the kind of the bubble. And then you can see across the practice field and the training facility and what they call the pavilion towards the stadium to the left. And you can see Union Square, this building is going to really hold the end of the soccer stadium district for the team. And we're really excited about this project because as you can see from the photographs, it's a bit of the building is a bit of a mud of a building. It's had lots of additions and demolishing buildings demolished around it. It's of course had a highway and a Metrolink built up around it, and which has kind of destroyed a lot of the neighboring buildings. This is a great chance to revitalize this part of the city and re-energize it. And we think it's a great chance to transform the building, like I said, is kind of a model building into something we think will be quite spectacular. So next slide, please. These are just some views looking at all the elevations. You've already seen this. The thing I want to point out here is really that, again, the highway, introduction to highway in the 60s, the Metrolink line there and the substation that accompanies it, the demolition of surrounding buildings both to the north and to the south have really significantly altered the building. The other thing to know, and we'll talk about this in a bit, is that building itself is a product of a few phases. So next slide, please. There's been a lot of changes to the building. There's been the canopy used to be very extensive around this building, and it has been fairly arbitrarily or reduced or edited in very quick utilitarian ways. There hasn't been much care in the reduction of this canopy. I would say it has to do with the expansion of the highway, and you can see in some of the photographs it's been basically welded or cut off pretty ungainly way. So the building is also in need of a lot of love. It's got spalling concrete. The canopy itself, the structure is corroding in several places. There's just general disrepair in the brick and the concrete. And there's accessibility challenges with the building. Next slide, please. So these are just some close-up views of that canopy, and you can see one of the really interesting things about the building. We'll get to the history a bit. Is when it was built, it's a manufacturing facility for generators in the 1920s. And one of the salient features was this double height door, which had electrical rolling door. You can see the axle and the gears are still there. The door is not, but the double height is there. And there's a double height space within the building where generators were moved on a crane out to trains to the east of the building. Next slide, please. This is just a view of the spalling, and so we're going to take care and repair this concrete as best as possible, and do our best to match the concrete. And you can see it even. You're actually looking at a building that's been added on the top, so you can see the concrete's actually different in the second phase it was in the first. Next slide. This is the view into that double height space. This is the original hall where they made the generators and then moved them out of the building onto the train yards. And this will become an event space, which will be available for the team, but also for outside renters as well. Next slide, please. This is some history on the project. 1918 was the original construction. The company evidently was doing really well at the time. Immediately, they began thinking about an expansion. One of the interesting things is when they expanded it, they not only expanded to the north, but they expanded over the top of the building. So when you look at the building, you'll see the original building had an expressed concrete frame. When they did the 1921 expansion, they chose not to express that concrete frame for some reason, probably because they didn't want to spend the money doing it. And so you see the facade is a little confusing when you look at it. There's a lower piece that has an express frame, the upper piece does not. And again, they had a large platform to the south and canopies that expanded on the south side of the building and also north to south, connecting another building. So next slide, please. This is just a view, and it's kind of in its context. This is 1930. You can see 21st Street at that point. Across the railroad tracks, the highway wasn't there, of course, and you can see there's a set of canopies that connected, kind of in an O shape. The canopy went east to west along the south facade of this building, and there's a canopy both on the west side and the east side that ran to the building to the south. You can see that one of the things that's changed is that the entry of the building was always on the west side, and of course that's changed now with the realignment of the roads and the highway and the railroad tracks. And this now is what used to be the front of the building is now essentially the back of the building. Next slide, please. So we did some research, dug this out of the Post. And it was just a description before the building was built, and we think some of this description was optimistic, things that never came to being. For instance, there was a description of a overhanging copper cornice in the building, which never seemed to happen from what we can tell. It did describe the steel sash windows, and it described a glass canopy. We don't have any evidence there was ever a glass canopy there, but it also described the steel rolling shutters as a important part of it. For the next slide, please. These are some views a little newer from 1960s, about the time the highway was being considered, and 21st Street still. This is still the entry on 21st Street. One thing we just noticed is that the canopies themselves, you can see them connecting the buildings in the image to the right. We can't quite tell, but there may have been signage on that canopy. It looks like it in this photograph that is certainly a possibility. Next slide, please. This is, we did some research. We actually found there's a great community of train enthusiasts who share photographs online, and we found this community, and they actually had several photographs of trains in this area. And we found our building in these photographs. This is the building shown in yellow, and if you go to the next slide, we have really the only record of the windows that we can see. And so this is the kind of depicting a train in front of the building. And this photograph shows that we believe the original canopy was covered in plate or corrugated steel. We can't quite tell. And you can see the sash in the windows upper right-hand corner. We've got the highlighted yellow, and we believe it was a multi-pane steel window with a horizontal sash in the bottom. And we are proposing to essentially duplicate that with the replacement windows. Next slide, please. This is a view of the canopy originally from 1930. If you go to the next slide, this next slide depicts what we think was done to the canopy when it was reduced. So it was reduced in the east to west canopy was reduced on the west side as well as on the east side. And the canopy running from the north to south, we think it was reduced not only in the length, but also in the width of it east to west. As I said, it seemed to be reduced fairly arbitrarily. Next slide, please. And these are some views of the remnants. So you can see there's a large wide flange beam that was coming through the building that supported that canopy that was cut off on both the east and west sides. And then the image to the right shows that this steel canopy, which is over 100 years old, is beginning to corrode through the steel. So what this really means is to restore this canopy will take significant effort and investment from the owner. And so our proposal is to do this right. And and you'll see in a bit, one of our considerations is to really focus. We think it's important to retain this canopy or part of it, but to really focus the effort and do it right in fewer areas rather than the whole thing. Next slide, please. So this is just showing that wide flange on the west side, kind of where the other canopy connected. Next slide. And then this is to help you understand the program of the building. This is a sectional perspective cut through the existing building, showing the dashed line to the left shows kind of the height of the highway. So 2 of the stories are below the level of the highway and 3 are above it. There's this double height space to the south where the event space will be. And there's a triple height space to the north, which is a tenant of theirs. And then the office space will be on the upper two floors primarily, with great views to the stadium district. They're going to have office space up here, which will overview the whole district. Next slide, please. So administrative offices, office support, media and broadcast studio will be in the event space, and then of course the event space. And this is great. We think this is going to really, they're going to bring over 100 employees here, and plus the events here that will really reinvigorate this whole area on the South District. Next slide, please. This is a site plan. You can see to the left is the site plan of the Stadium District itself. In the red box is our building. And then to the right is a close-up site plan showing the main entry will be at that double height space where they used to move generators in and out of the building. We are revising the drop-off and parking to the south of the building. And part of this is to have, when events happen, the drop-off is going to be heavily used. And we're very intent on creating the safest possible environment for people to get to the building from their cars. And so drop-off here is really important to be able to drop people off. So that's a site change we're making. And this dovetails into our concern about keeping that southern canopy, because that is a challenge to keep that canopy, the foundation of the canopy, and have this drop off. Next slide, please. This is just a view of showing that building and how the facade, we think that north facade is really important to connect to the training and the stadium and the pavilion architecturally. So we'd like these things to be in dialogue. Next slide, please. So, you know, philosophically, we'd like to do 2 things really. So one is to preserve and celebrate what we consider the salient aspects of Union Square. We think Union Square, while it's not we don't think it's a building of significance. We do think it marks a really important period of time for St. Louis, and especially its connection to industry and the railroad transportation network that came through here. So we want to make sure that this building has a sense of historic clarity and legibility. And we want people to be able to read the building. For us, it actually took us weeks to really understand this building. And because it has so much attached to it over time, we'd like to really clean this building up so when someone approaches it or they understand it, they can begin to understand the story of the building. And then part of that story is this new future that City Soccer Club is envisioning. And we think this is a great moment where the history of St. Louis can be dovetailed into its future, into its new history. And we like this kind of dual or multiple readings of the building where you can both see the history and background to the city, but also you can see its future as well. Next slide, please. So our strategies are to preserve, restore the east, west, and south facades. We're going to, of course, refurbish the masonry and concrete. We're going to replace all the windows. We're going to, our strategy is to replace, refurbish, and reduce some of the steel canopy. So really to improve the clarity of the building itself, to preserve the elements that have been deteriorated and ensure that they're safe and that they last another 100 years as well. And then with the north facade, we want to create these dramatic views of the district. We want to kind of help brand the character of the district and create a dialogue between the buildings in the district. And again, express these kind of multiple histories there. Next slide, please. So this is just a quick summary of the window. I think, you know, this is, again, our best understanding of what the window might look like, and we are intent on duplicating those in all the windows on the east,
Mr. Ryan?
west. Yes. Yep.
Interrupt you for 1 second. Commissioners, have you seen enough?
Yes.
Yes.
Commissioner Colleen, have you got a motion?
Well, I want to thank Mr. Ryan for your detailed research and wonderful presentation. But your project is just strong enough that I think we can just go ahead and vote on it and send you home early. At least
Okay.
I feel that way. I move the Preservation Board grant preliminary approval to this design with the stipulation that details and materials be worked out with staff.
Second.
I second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstains? Motion carries. Mr. Ryan, I wanted to hear the rest of it, but the architects were all antsy in the background saying, this is good. This is really good. This is really good. So congratulations.
Well, yeah. Sorry for having so many slides, but thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, commissioners. We now reconstitute ourselves as an administrative hearing board. We're going to hear an appeal of a director's denial. I'm going to ask the people who testify to swear or affirm that they're telling the truth and to leave their contact information in the chat or directly with Cultural Resources. So calling agenda item E 212 North Kingshighway Boulevard.
I am Andrea Gagan with the Cultural Resources Office, and I swear to tell the truth.
Indeed.
This is 212 North Kingshighway Boulevard in the Central West End Local Historic District. I need to enter into the record ordinance 64689 is amended by 64925. Ordinance, which is the enabling ordinance. The Central West End Ordinance 56768 is amended by 69423, sorry. The agenda and the PowerPoint. This is, actually, I'm just going to go ahead and read into the record, the appeal letter from the applicant, since it kind of gives some background on what happened. This is from Leslie Zimmerman, Matthew Moore, and James Justin, PE. The memorandum is in response to the initial letter issued April 2020 by Mr. Daniel Krasnov, the director of the Cultural Resources Office at the time, concerning the replacement windows recently installed within the Chase Park Plaza Hotel. In 2018, a significant masonry restoration project was undertaken by the hotel hotel ownership to repair, restore the existing facade system at the building. The masonry restoration project included extensive repairs to the masonry facade, including complete repointing of the masonry to help eliminate water infiltration and replacement of damaged, distressed terracotta units like in kind. Repairs to the historic first floor windows were also included in the project and required significant rehabilitation, including lead paint abatement, to restore them to a functional state while maintaining their historic appearance. After the project was already underway, ownership identified that additional funds were available and the current 1980s vintage guest room windows should be replaced. They were in extremely poor condition, leaking both air and water into the facility. Stat Construction, the project general contractor, submitted a mock-up window samples from Manco Window Systems to replace the existing windows in the hotel. Stat submitted a 3572I series, a 3.5-inch deep architectural grade thermally broken fixed window system, which appeared to generally match the appearance of the existing window assembly. The replacement windows had a horizontal mounting across the center of the system to simulate double hung assembly and was low profile, flat configuration to maximize sound and thermal performance. At the Chester building, the upper light was further subdivided with a grid system to reflect a 4-light pattern. The selected windows were purchased and construction commenced in the fall of 2020. Unfortunately, a permit for the replacement windows was not applied for prior to window replacement work starting. As the project was nearing completion, the aforementioned correspondence was received by the hotel from the Cultural Resources Office, which indicated there was no record of a permit being issued for window replacement. Stat attempted to apply for a permit after the fact, submitting the plans for the windows they installed, but it was rejected based on stated failure to meet the city's historical requirements. They were told the windows would need to match the originals In subsequent email, July 2020, and several in-person conversations with Mosaic personnel, Mr. Krasnov cited the Central West and neighborhood historic district standards did not appear to have been met. He noted with regard to the windows facing Kingshighway and Lindell Avenue west of the long balconies, they were not double hung windows, and that the brick mold was metal and did not match what would have been original. On the windows to the east of the long balconies, the Chester building, the glass proportions were differed as the upper sashes appeared smaller than the lower sash, and these proportions were not equivalent to those in a historic window. The mullions also appeared flat and were not historically appropriate. Since that time, the construction team, Mosaic staff, has worked with Daniel Krasnov and Ms. Andrea Gagan to prepare a series of modification mock-ups in an attempt to allow the newly installed windows to remain on the public facade. The 2 rounds of mock-ups that include a total of 4 different modification configurations for each set of windows were performed. Following the completion of the mock-up, Mosaic met with Ms. Jam Cameron, Ms. Andrea Gagan, and Mr. James Schweier to discuss the results of the mock-ups and to determine how to proceed. Mosaic believes that it has reached a basis of understanding with the Cultural Resources Office staff and the Central West End Historic District. In summary, Mosaic believes the following understanding has been reached. Primary hotel facility, Kingshighway, Lindell Avenue, and pool return elevations. The street facing windows will be modified to provide a shadow line at the horizontal intermediate mutton to simulate what have been the check rail on the original double hung windows. A number of component configurations were installed during the mock-ups, and Mosaic understands that the 1.5 inch deep piece trim mounted to the face of the horizontal was deemed acceptable to provide the required shadow line. And I'll show you a proposed modification of that later. The Chester building, Lindell Avenue return elevation. There are 91 affected windows on these 2 elevations. While Mosaic appears to be generally successful in correcting the appearance of the 4-light grille on the top section and reestablishing the saddle line at the check rail location, the proportions of the upper to lower sections could not be changed to meet Crow's staff requirements without removing the horizontal member downward roughly 3 inches. Unfortunately, there's no effective method available to make those modifications to the existing replacement windows, and they will have to be replaced. Mosaic has been in contact with the Marvin representative, and new ultimate wood double hung magnum windows are to be installed as shown. I'll also show you that. The windows were selected off the conforming wood window replacement windows for local historic districts list dated May 12th, 2021, and provided by Ms. Gagan. And then this is what was done. This is just the site, the corner of North Kingshighway and Lindell Boulevard. This is a close-up of a modified 1/1 window. It is not double hung, as was stated in the letter, but they have added a piece to the molly or the mutton here to make it larger, to make it appear that there is a shadow line. And this you can see the window above is a window that has not been modified, and in comparison to the window has been. As you can see, the window above has a much flatter appearance. They are not doing anything to the square brick mold, as they would have to take the window out, I believe, to fix that. And this is just another photo of a pair of windows that are installed, the 1/1s. They had not been modified yet at this point. And these are just photos of the installed windows along Lindell and the pool returns. All of these windows would be modified under their agreement, including all the ones on the Kingshighway side as well. This is the modification they're making to those 1/1 windows. Basically, it's just the addition of that piece on the front of the window at the middle to create a shadow line to make it appear as a double hung. And this is the Chester apartments, which are to the east of balconies. The photo on the right, or sorry, on the left is the original, well, they're not original ones, but the 1980 era windows that were replaced by the windows on the right. As you can see, the proportions are off on those windows. And with the divided lights, it makes it even more noticeable. So we felt that these were the most important windows to get right. This is an example of previous windows on the Chester building and an example of one of the windows that was installed. And this is their solution using a Marvin Ultimate Double Hung window, which would comply with the historic district standards. So basically, the applicants have made efforts to modify the 1/1 windows in Kingshighway and Lindell elevations to give the illusion of depth. While the windows do not comply with the historic district standards in their material, lower sash proportions, panning of trim, depth, and profile, the modifications may be an acceptable compromise due to the large number of windows that were replaced. The Chester windows further do not comply and the sash sizes are not equal, which alters the appearance of the mutton pattern. The applicant is willing to replace all of these non-compliant windows with Marvin Ultimate Double Hung windows that do comply with the historic district standards. And that actually includes the windows on the Chester that face Lindell, as well as one bay around the corner, which is where the fenestration is the same as what's on the front. The modifications performed to attempt to bring the chase windows closer in appearance for the original 101s have succeeded in giving the appearance of some depth to the windows. So the Cultural Resources Office has recommended the Preservation Board overturn the director's denial to retain the windows on the chase and replace the windows on the Chester with appropriate historic replacement windows, with final drawings and details to be approved by the Cultural Resources Office.
Commissioners, it is my intention to ask you if you have questions for Ms. Gagan, and then to ask the appellant if the appellant agrees with what has been introduced into the record. And if they say yes, then to entertain a motion. So first, do you have questions for staff? Okay, is the appellant present?
Chairman, I guess I have one quick question.
Go ahead,
Coder.
Sure.
You know, obviously this was a major rehab point where all these windows were installed. I mean, out the division or resources or, you know, issuing a stock and speak to that.
Sorry, you kind of cut out, but we were not aware, we got a complaint, but at that point, most of the windows were already in.
Okay, yeah, I guess my question, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah. All right, it's just simply, you know, how do we look back and see sort of where the breakdown was? I mean, how does a multi-million-dollar renovation of a building on a prominent corner happen, and years down the road, we're just dealing with an appeal on the windows? I mean, how come nobody noticed this?
Well, they did have a permit for interior work and for some exterior work on the porte cochere that's not historic. And that was a few years ago. So I'm not sure how I mean, you have to ask. And obviously they're the people from the, you know, dealing mostly with the windows, but they might be able to answer that better than I can. You know, obviously windows and tuck point are something that aren't necessarily required for permits if you're not in a historic district, but obviously there was a definite breakdown. And I think some of the work had previously been done by the previous owner. And I don't know. I mean, I've spoken to people from the Sonesta previously, but that had been a couple of years ago.
Okay,
Andy,
thanks.
could I ask a question? I'm
Sure.
sorry. Oops.
Yes.
Oh, I can't hear you. Yep, sorry, just a second. Let me move.
Andy,
Yes, sorry, you're
what
muted.
was the work on the windows performed?
It was performed, let's see. It was performed probably, it was before April 2020. Or I mean, it was almost completed at that point when we sent the letter.
And why is it taking this long to get to the board?
Because we had denied it, they had to reapply later. We were trying to work out with them whether or not they want to try to make modifications to see whether or not they could retain the windows they had installed. So because of COVID and delays with materials and stuff, it just took that long to get, because every time they made a modification, we had to go out and look at it. And it would, time took quite a while for them to get the materials for them to make the modifications and get it installed.
Thank you. And my only comment would be, it's still baffling to me that a project of this scale, that was going up in the building, multiple city agencies were involved, and it got entirely completed before we sent a violation notice. It sounds like, I just think that's kind of crazy. We just got to figure out why that happened and fix it going forward. It sounds like the appellants working with the city, and we've got a solution. So I'll shut up now, but it's just, there was obviously some breakdown in the process.
Further questions for Ms. Gagan? Okay, is the appellant present?
Yeah, this is Les Brennan with Mosaic Engineering Consulting, representing both ownership, the contractor, and the design team.
Will your testimony be the truth?
Yes, it will.
Have you heard the compromise outlined by Ms. Gagan?
We have, and we agree.
Okay, thank you very much. Questions for the appellant? Okay. Commissioner Richardson, have you got a motion?
Yeah, that the Preservation Board overturn the director's denial of the application to replace the windows on the Chase and allow the worked out compromise solution and approve new historic replacement windows on the Chester building.
Is there a second?
Okay.
Motion made and seconded. Is there any discussion? Okay, I'm going to call a roll on the motion. Commissioner Fathman, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson, do you vote yes or no? Commissioner Hamilton, do you vote yes or no? Commissioner Killeen, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Richardson, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Weber, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Alderman Coder, do you vote yes or no?
Yes.
Commissioner Robinson, are you here? Commissioner Hamilton, are you here? The chair abstains. That's 5 yeses. The motion carries. I'm sorry. Who spoke?
Oh, yes.
Let the
I
record,
apologize for my technical difficulties. I don't know.
let the record reflect a yes vote cast by Commissioner Hamilton. Commissioner Robinson, are you here? The record shows 6 yes votes and an abstention. The motion carries.
Point of information, Chairman. Mr.
Yes,
Chairman. Why did this issue even come before us if staff and the applicant were in agreement?
There was a director's denial in place.
Oh, okay. Got it. Thank you.
Sure. Well, thank you all very much. Can the technology be fixed to allow us to go into executive session?
Did you say we're going into closed session?
We are.
Do you need to end the
We
meeting?
need a motion, Chairman. We need a motion to close. I'm not gonna defer to staff for the technical, how we're gonna do it, but we actually need a motion pursuant to 610 to discuss legal matters.
Do I hear such a motion, Alderman Coder?
I move to go into executive closed session to discuss legal matters pursuant to 610 of the revised statutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Barb, do we need a roll call or can a voice
Yes,
vote?
we do.
Calling a roll.
Previous roll.
Any objections? Okay, we adopt the previous roll. We still show 18 participants on this